On to our regularly scheduled meeting of September 8th. Welcome. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call roll?
With pleasure, Mayor. Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Pappen.
Here.
Councilmember Bonilla.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Rodriguez.
Here.
Mayor Goethals.
Here. Welcome, everyone. We are still meeting virtually due to the constraints of physical distancing and COVID-19. We do have opportunities for public comment based on what was published in our agenda. I want to let everyone know that if we experience a blackout, which is possible based on the heat that we had over the last few days, that we will investigate how serious the blackout is and how long it's supposed to last. And then we will take a vote as a council whether to proceed that evening based on the power coming back on or whether to adjourn over to the next meeting. With that having been said, I'm going to start with our ceremonial items.
Mr. Mayor, the first one up is the Wildfire Mitigation Plan update.
Yes, and I just looked and I have the wrong one. I have the National Emergency Preparedness one for the 21st.
I will bring you another agenda.
Thank you very much. I'd be more than happy to read that proclamation. In the meantime, I want to mention that we started an amazing tradition last year with our mayor, Mayor Pappen.
Mr. Mayor, we have the Wildfire Mitigation Plan update, which is a presentation, not a proclamation. And
great.
We have Robert Marshall on the line to present that.
Marshall, welcome. We will turn it over to you for your presentation.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This is the first time I've addressed this council with regards to the wildfire mitigation plan and what we're doing. I know that this is a hot topic right now because all you have to do to understand fire danger and its impacts on our living systems, all you have to do is go outside and take a look at the sky, and you'd be able to see exactly what can happen. And we've had fires very close to home this year, which is a little unusual, particularly this early in the season. Normally, Northern California fire season starts at the end of September into October, and this year it started much, much earlier with the lightning strike fires. So I know that this is something that is on everybody's mind, and everybody is wondering what it is that we are doing as the fire department to try and keep everybody as safe as we possibly can. I'd like to show you guys some things that we've been working on and things that we've been doing. So I'm going to switch over to my screen here real quick. So you should be able to see it momentarily. One of the biggest things that we've been doing is trying to get a handle on exactly what the fire hazards are within the jurisdiction. We're doing this, of course, for the two main jurisdictions that have a wildfire risk for San Mateo and Belmont. Foster City, thankfully, doesn't have a lot of wildfire risk from the catastrophic, huge type wildfires, so they were not part of the study. So we've been looking at that. We're trying to coordinate that information with the state as well. This is the current map that the state has, but the state is in the process of updating their maps and will be identifying more fire hazard severity zones that are in local responsibility areas. The biggest change here is going to be that they're going to start classifying high fire hazard danger in city limits which is different than what they've done in years past. They've only done the very high fire hazard severity zones. When it comes to very high, San Mateo has very little very high, but there is going to be a lot that I think will fall into the high zones, and there will be legal ramifications to that. And so we're still trying to figure out exactly how that's going. That's still one of the big topics with the state legislature, and we're trying to see what all settled out from the previous weeks in session. So more to come on that. Another one of the things that we've been doing is we've acquired some other software to help us with some of the evaluations of the fire hazards, particularly as it relates to individual properties. So this is a program that we purchased, and what it allows us to do is to go through neighborhoods and look at wildfire risk and see if people have done the things that they need to do. So one of the things we could do is come over here and we could tap on one of these and take a look at the parcel where it is, and we can say that, you know, you need to get trees away from your chimney, for instance, or you need to put a spark arrestor on your chimney. Maybe your grasses are too high. Maybe we can't find your address. That's another one of those things that we look at. So there are a number of things that we do. And so all we have to do is say, hey, we want to have you cut your weeds, and then we can notify people. Right now, we haven't started using this as an enforcement tool. What we're doing right now is we're using it as an education tool because we're still kind of working out kinks in the system because it's very, very new to us. But two, we don't really have an ordinance yet. We do plan to have an ordinance. The ordinance will go through the fire department first and then come to you for ratification. And what we will do is we will enumerate in that ordinance what things people need to do to make themselves fire safe, whether it is fuel reduction or chimney clearance or clearing out gutters or what have you. One of the big things about that, though, is an education component. So education is going to be the key to all of this, and that actually ties into one of our biggest tools, one of the things that we've been working very, very hard on. So with the education piece, one of the things that we have at our disposal is a thing called Zone Haven. And Zone Haven is an evacuation software that helps us to provide for evacuations in particular zones. We've designated a number of different zones. You can see them all over the place through here. And this is a countywide project. So if something happened in Hillsborough and was burning into San Mateo, for example, we'd be able to evacuate those zones one by one. This is a project we've been working on for about a year. And it's been coming together more and more as time goes on, to the point where it is actually ready to be rolled out now. There's still some education pieces that need to go along with it, but in the CZU fires on the San Mateo-Santa Cruz border, they actually stood Zone Haven up a lot earlier than originally anticipated, so that we could actually go in and start using the program, because the data for the most part is there. I wanted to just kind of show you kind of how this works. So this is one of the zones, so I'll select that zone. And in that zone, when I click that, it will tell me a number of things about what's in the zone. It'll tell me what some of the estimated populations are, how many vehicles there are, how much area is in that zone, and how many structures are in the zone. And then it will also tell us who the primary fire departments are, who the primary law enforcement agencies are. And then we can go into the evacuation side and we can look at things like traffic control points. Where are the traffic control points that we might need to put police officers? What are the arrival points? In this particular zone, we've got CSM. And so we can direct people to go to CSM to the gym. We can just tell them to go directly to the campus, or we can tell them just to get on the freeway and drive to a different location. So all of these things help us to effectively evacuate people very quickly on our side. The other side of that, though, is the notification piece. So this actually integrates with SMC Alert, Twitter, Facebook, and a whole bunch of other social media platforms, and will allow us to put out mass numbers of notifications in a very short period of time, all according to where the danger is and how it works. One of the things that comes out through this is this called an evacuation pre-plan. So you will see this pop up here in a second. So this is something that we can send to people who are doing the evacuations. Typically, the way evacuations work is there's some kind of an incident, and the fire department, in the case of a fire, would say, hey, we need to evacuate these areas. We might say that we need to evacuate SM029, SME008, SME006, and we can mass notify all of the people in there. What we then can do is send this PDF to our police partners and to OES and to anybody else who needs it. And this will tell them how it is that we need to do this. The other thing that the Zonehaven will do is it will send a copy of this map that you see, this one here. It'll send a copy of this out to people who are signed up for the alerts to get them that way. I live in Contra Costa County, and they've been using this for a little over a year. And I live in an area where there was an evacuation, and I was really impressed with how quickly this worked, and what I was able to see and the information that it gave me so that I could make the proper decisions for what I felt was safest for me and my family. So we do know that this actually does work very, very well. And we've got really good reviews about how this worked down in the CZU fire complex in San Mateo and Santa Cruz counties. So we're very excited about that. One of the big things about this, though, is going to be the education piece, as I already mentioned. The education piece is such that we need people to know what their zones are going to be and what to do if they have a fire in their zone. What you're seeing here is the fire service and law enforcement side of this, but this will also have a public-facing side. In fact, during the CZU fires, one of the things that happened was CAL FIRE's website went down, and so the Zonehaven site was the one that was giving everybody their information. So we know that it can handle it. It did slow down a little bit at first, and then once it got rolling right along, everything was very good. I focused a little bit on the fires, but I wanted to point out that this goes all across the county in all areas of the county. So if there was some kind of an event, let's say there was a hazardous materials release on Highway 101, and we needed to evacuate people right around the Peninsula Avenue area, we've got the ability to do that. And not only do we have the ability to do it for us, but we could do it for Burlingame as well. We'd generally be in a unified command in that situation, and so we'd make the decision together to do that. But we do have the ability to look at all of the zones, and it's not just San Mateo specific or Foster City specific or Belmont specific. So that is something else that we are able to do. The education piece for this specifically will be rolling out at the end of September into early October, and we will have a big push. We're starting to get all the PIOs involved and all of the city staff involved to be able to start making these kinds of notifications. The other thing that we will be doing is running drills, both internally and then eventually externally, and have people participate from the outside. And that will be something that we will definitely keep everybody informed about. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Come back to you. One of the last things that I wanted to mention, I already mentioned that we will have an ordinance that will be generated. That'll be generated and ready for the public next year. Before we actually vote on the ordinance, we will have study sessions where the public will be invited and be able to give their input to us. A lot of this is going to be dictated by what state law is going to require, particularly when it comes to high and very high fire hazard severity zones. They are going to be dictating a lot about what cities need to do and what jurisdictions need to do. And along with that, though, and I've mentioned it before, is the education piece. So that is by far the most important piece. We need people to know what it is that they can do to make their homes safer, what to do if a fire is coming their way, and what to do for evacuations and so on. In order to do that, we actually just received notification that we were successful in obtaining a grant. That grant is for $85,000 and will help us to establish what we call fire-wise communities throughout the hills of San Mateo. And what that does is that helps to get people informed, but also put some of the responsibility on homeowners groups to be able to say, hey, we're a fire-wise community, and this is what that means. And they take all of those things seriously and work on making sure that their properties are clear and that they are as fire safe as they can be. It's a really great program, and we're very excited that we received the grant to be able to bring that out to the community. One of the other exciting pieces of that is that we will be, as part of that grant, we will be producing some TV spots that will go out on cable. And that is a nice thing because it's not only going to affect our residents, but residents countywide. Fire doesn't really respect boundaries. And so that's one of the big concerns is if we get a fire in the watershed, for example, that is burning south and east, that could very easily make it into San Mateo. So we need everybody to be kind of on the same page when it comes to fire risk. And we're hoping that at least in some small part, we will be leading the way to make sure that the entire county is fire safe, along with our other fire partners throughout the county. So if you guys have any questions, that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to take your questions now.
Any questions for Robert Marshall, our fire marshal? Yes, Councilmember Lee.
Marshall, great to have you and meet you. Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
So I had an interesting experience just this week where one of our transformers on our block caught on fire, and so I was, this is top of mind for myself and my community. I understand that a lot of our PG&E equipment is, is part of an aging infrastructure, and with climate change and increased heat waves and the risk of fire hazards associated with these transformers, especially during the heat waves, is a known quantity. And so I'm curious how or if that information is being integrated into the mitigation plan or the tracking. When you talk about the opportunity to do pruning for things that are part of our infrastructure and not necessarily on private property, like where do those kinds of risks factor into the system as a whole?
Yeah, that is a great question. So PG&E does have a program by which we are educated on where their infrastructure is and what to do if there is a problem with their infrastructure. They're also very, very good about communicating with us about what the hazards are during given weather events. As you can imagine right now, we're getting a lot of notifications from PG&E about the things that are going on and what could happen. They basically break them down into three areas. The first one is the public safety power shutoffs, which we had a little bit of last year. And that season is upon us again. And so we'll know about that and we'll put out messaging related to that when we know about those events happening. When we have weather-related outages, they also give us a lot of notifications and tell us, there could be issues. Here's what to look for. That is much harder to predict, obviously. The public safety power shutoffs should take care of the areas that are in high fire danger as a result of that, as the result of weather events. But they're impossible to predict because we don't know if it's a high wind event. We don't know which line is going to come down or which transformer is going to blow, et cetera. And then the other one is the Cal ISO power downs, the shutoffs, rolling blackouts, as most people are used to them being called. And so they communicate very well with us on all of those things. The actual mitigation efforts are actually managed by the Public Utilities Commission. We don't have the ability to manage that locally, although we're aware of the things that go on locally, particularly if somebody doesn't want to comply. PG&E typically lets us know about that and enlists our help to try and figure out a way forward so that we don't have a fire hazard that's in a given area. Once we have our ordinance in place, one of the things that will be taken care of in there is what happens on private property when there's utility easements and that kind of thing on private property, and how that'll integrate, and making sure that weeds are cut down and that there isn't what we call ladder fuels, which is where you've got, if you think about a wildfire like you would a campfire, you can't start a campfire by just throwing 3 big logs into a fire pit and lighting it and hoping that you'll get any sort of heat out of that. You have to have newspaper and then straw and then smaller twigs and then build up to the big logs. And that's the whole goal of the mitigations that that we try and do is to try and eliminate that ladder so that you don't have the kindling. All you have is the big logs, and try and do it that way. The power definitely plays into what goes on there. On private residences, it's specifically for the weatherhead drops, which is where the power comes from, the power pole, and hooks into your house. So that's the way that PG&E integrates into our plans, and it definitely is something that we consider.
Thank you. Well, if there's any opportunity for us to do some advocacy from the council side, I think, I, for one, would be very supportive of that, especially if the ball's in their court or the Public Utilities Commission to at least inventory where, what the status of their transformers are, how old they are, and what potential risk category they fall into, and identifying where those could be, and then potentially syncing up where our tree pruning schedule gets prioritized and those kinds of things.
Certainly.
Excellent. Any more questions for Robert Marshall? Seeing none, thank you so much, Robert, for the update. I appreciate it. I'll see you at our next fire board meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Goethals.
As I was saying earlier, our former Mayor Diane Pappen established the Quarterly Heroes Award, and it was an excellent way to recognize those in our community who are just outstanding in the way that they serve our community. I was so proud of the people who she selected to honor last year, and here we are. Our meetings have been interrupted over 2020, but I think it's important to make sure that we recognize the special work that we see in our community. So I'd like to start with the first quarter. Back in the first quarter, I announced that Sylvia Lopez was going to be our first quarterly hero in 2020. At the Special Chamber Awards, I was able to announce that and recognize her. She retired recently in June of 2020. She's worked for the Chamber since 2007, recruiting hundreds of ambassadors to enrich the economic development of San Mateo, hundreds of ribbon cuttings and grand openings. The Chamber is just part of the backbone and economic engine of San Mateo. So it was critical this year for the Chamber to step up in our response to COVID-19. And I know that she helped many struggling small businesses to secure payroll loans and to figure out, in some instances, how to furlough some workers, in some instances, how to get workers back on the payroll, and how to open up throughout COVID. So I was honored to be able to recognize Sylvia. I'm looking to see if she's with us tonight. I don't see her, but I will reach out to her very soon. In the second quarter, I was particularly honored to be able to award the Quarterly Heroes Award to Ruby Cajo of Samaritan House. Ruby, as many of you know, works in the kitchen. Ruby Cajo Montano. Anybody who's ever been to Samaritan House knows Ruby and has seen how hard she works in order to feed the soul of thousands of San Mateo residents. Over the past nearly 20 years, Ruby has served literally over 1 million meals to hungry residents of San Mateo, filling the stomachs and revitalizing the spirit of those struggling in our community. Ruby, tonight, we salute you. Thank you for everything that you do and everything that you represent. You are the heart and soul of our community, and we cannot thank you enough. And thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Ruby. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Ruby, would you like to say anything?
I take this opportunity to thank you, and thanks to our community. We all help each other and make the difference of our life. Even this time, we have a tough time, but we make it. We're here to help whatever side they need the help. All they do, just sign in and request any form and let Samaritan House knows wherever they are. We can serve them with love.
I want to say to every San Mateo resident, if you are ever down, if you ever need to be inspired, all you have to do is go to the Samaritan House and see the work that Ruby does, and it will lift us up. San Mateo will survive, and we will be resilient because of the spirit that Ruby embodies and represents. And I cannot thank you for being that to our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the third quarter, I selected a familiar face, someone who many people know, Anna Cure. Anna Cure has represented San Mateo in many capacities, mostly as a representative of SMUHA, the San Mateo United Homeowners Association, and I wanted to recognize Anna for a lifetime of service to the San Mateo community, bringing residents together to improve our quality of life and the governance of all San Mateo residents. There are many instances when she was the person who brought us together and made sure that we were pushing San Mateo forward. And her voice was always an important voice. Unfortunately, Anna could not join us tonight. And it is very, I think, important to point out that when the recent wildfires broke out, she had relatives and friends who were in danger and had to be evacuated. And Anna was the first one to step up, and she is currently housing them. She's not only housing family and friends and relatives, she's housing their animals and other things at her home. It just is one example of how she's always there to step up and be the leader that we need in the community. And I look forward to honoring her at some night, at some future council meeting. It is, I think, important to recognize her life of service to San Mateo, an important voice. I would be remiss if I did not mention that yesterday was Labor Day, and Labor Day is an important day as we recognize the labor movement and how much progress we've made in the years leading up to 2020 and how much more is left to go. Labor Day has been celebrated since 1882 and was made an official holiday in 1894. And the achievements that we have for workers' rights are important to celebrate, not only once a year, but literally every day of the year. It's important for us to do that. And so I recognize Labor Day. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council in San Mateo hereby celebrate Labor Day in 2020. Signed the Mayor, Joe Goethals. But that leads me to my next selection, which is our Q4 Hero Award, Julie Lynn Rupp. Julie, Julie, you don't get to talk yet. This is a big announcement.
You're a sneaky one.
Julie represents the San Mateo Labor Council. She is responsible for ensuring fair, livable wages for working families across this county. This is endless, grueling, difficult work. She led the fight for the $15 an hour minimum wage, which raised wages for all. And it should be noted that this campaign mostly benefited people who are not in unions, people who are not represented. But it was the labor community that really led that fight. And the fight for safe and fair workplaces never ends. And most importantly, I want to point out that recently when COVID-19 hit, Julie was there to make sure that essential workers, whether they were in grocery stores or nurses or teachers, had all of the PPE that they needed. It was absolutely essential that they have a safe and fair workplace. And for the last several months, Julie has led an effort of food distribution for working families. So many working families are out of work right now because our economy is shut down. And those families are hungry with empty tables. And Julie has led the effort, along with hundreds of others, to feed thousands and thousands of hungry working families. Julie, I am so proud of you. You are such an important part of the San Mateo community, and it's my honor to call you the fourth quarter mayor's hero. Thank you.
Well, that is very surprising and very sweet and generous of all of you. Thank you very much for this incredible honor. Had no idea. So good, you're a tricksy one, Mayor Joe, getting me on the call. But as you mentioned, we just celebrated Labor Day, which to so many is a day off from work and a barbecue day. Maybe not this year, obviously, because of COVID and the numerous impacts that's had on every aspect of everyone's life. But for the labor community, it's an opportunity to reflect on all of the accomplishments made on behalf of working people over the decades, including the 8-hour day, the right to a weekend, workplace protections, access to healthcare, paid days off, OSHA protections, paid family leave, the minimum wage in a lot of cases, as you had mentioned. And thank you again to your city for taking the lead on raising the wage in the county. And you've been followed by 8 other cities thus far. Hopefully tonight we'll make it 9 in Burlingame. But really, it's an opportunity to come together and think about not only what we as working people have been able to accomplish in the past as we've stood together to speak collectively, but really what can we accomplish in the future by continuing to work together. So going back to the pandemic, the impact on frontline workers, the impact on low wage workers has been in many ways catastrophic. So we in the labor community are continuing to work together to try to figure out how we can ensure proper protections for all of our frontline workers, how they get necessary personal protective equipment, continuing to lobby at the federal level for relief packages that actually will go into the hands of local jurisdictions like yourselves that will help so many workers that have been out of work for months or looking to potentially lose their jobs with the expiration of the CARES Act funding. We do the food distributions to help our workers in the community in need. We have thus far administered nearly $300,000 in hardship funds to individuals that have been unable to collect unemployment, either because of their lack of hours or because of their immigration status. We continue to work with the county to figure out different protections that need to come into play to ensure that people are able to reopen safely, both for the public and for the workers. So Labor Day for us really is an opportunity to celebrate what we've done and to reinvigorate ourselves and our community about what we have the opportunity to accomplish together in the future. And so as the head of the Labor Council, I'm incredibly lucky to work with your council and to have leaders like all of you advocating every day and everything that you do to ensure that your constituents are protected and that they have access to all of the different aspects of the American dream, which really everyone is entitled to. And I also want to commend you on your work toward equity and equality, just by virtue of all of the things that have happened recently in the world. So you all are really leading the charge in a variety of ways. You always have been since coming on to this council. So I think your city is incredibly lucky.
Excuse me. This is
Yes,
about
dear.
you. This is about you. This is
It's
not
not
about
my-
the council. Don't try to turn this around on the council. I just want to point out to you.
I'm sorry,
You're-
you're infringing upon my time. I'm
Your-
sorry, I'm still
your-
going.
Your father raised a strong advocate. Sorry, my lights went on. Your parents raised an amazing advocate, strong and tough, and your work is never done. And we just saw your daughter there, and you're doing the same thing. You're doing the same thing, and tonight is just about saying thank you. We're proud of you. The work isn't over. Go get $15 an hour from Burlingame tonight. We're very
I
proud
will
of
do
you.
my best. Well, thank you again.
I want to say to
looking forward
all,
continuing the work.
thank you, Julie. I want to
Thank
say
you,
to all the
Julie.
heroes, you inspire me every single day. Keep it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
Madam Clerk, would you read the titles on the consent calendar? Actually, yes, please.
With pleasure, Mayor. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered by the council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion without discussion. If discussion is desired, that item may be removed and considered separately. Item number 4 is City Council meeting minutes approval. Item number 5, League of California Cities Annual Conference voting delegate designation. Item number 6, Concord Passages Mixed Use Project Development Agreement approval, ordinance adoption. Item 7, El Camino Real Sanitary Sewer Rehabilitation Project Agreement. Item 8, Citywide Street Rehabilitation Package 1B Project Agreement. Item 9, Contracts with Contingency Component and Update. Item 10, Active Transportation Program Grant Application Letter of Support. Item 11, Rule 20A Utility Undergrounding Agreements. Item 12 is the Public Works Bucket Truck Purchase Contract, and there has been a request to remove that item to be considered separately. Item 13, California High-Speed Rail Environmental Impact Report Comment Letter. Item 14, Tree Trimming Services and Agreement. Item 15, Community Development Department and Public Works Department Classification Updates. And item 16, Merit Employees Salary Schedule Approval.
Other than the items mentioned, is there any other item that any member of the public or member of the council would like to pull? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I'll move to adopt all of the items except for, where's the bucket? Except for item 12, please.
Second that.
We have motion second. Madam Clerk, would you call roll?
With pleasure, Mayor, we have Councilmember Pappen,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rodriguez,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee.
Aye.
Councilmember Bonilla,
Aye.
Mayor Gozos.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Excellent. And so we'll move on to the pulled item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I requested to pull this item because, as I have mentioned before, upon making purchases, I have had some questions about our purchasing policy and about how far we reach out to find providers, I guess based on price, which is, I think, what the bottom line consideration is. First of all, I have a question. I spoke with the city manager earlier, and I was eager to find out what is the urgency of this purchase. I see Mr. Underwood there, or the city manager. Would one of you like to address that? Do we have to do this tonight?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Bonilla. I'm actually going to take a little time in answering your question because I think it's important that I kind of explain the process by which we go through for this type of specialty equipment in purchasing it. And this equipment is a large utility vehicle with a bucket on it and a crane as well, a combination. So we actually will kind of work in reverse when we make this purchase by choosing the vendor that actually outfits the chassis. So supplies all the crane equipment and so forth, because that's really the most important part of this piece of equipment. Chassis, is pretty mundane and normal, although we know what type of chassis we want with the Ford unit. So we utilize Sourcewell once we choose the vendor that can actually put the equipment on the chassis. And Sourcewell has gone through a competitive bidding process, so they have the pricing on this type of equipment. And so they match up the vendor of the chassis with the supplier who has worked with outfitting this piece of equipment for this type of vehicles and other specialty vehicles that we've ordered in the past. So the advantages to the city of using this process is it's already a competitive bidding process, performed by Sourcewell, by someone else that's statewide, utilized statewide. We have one contract with one vendor. We have one insurance to deal with, and we have one warranty. If an issue arises after delivery, we deal with that one vendor, a single vendor. And then if we bid it separately, in other words, go out for a chassis and then go out for the equipment that gets mounted on the chassis, we have multiple vendors, we have multiple contracts, we have multiple insurances and warranties, and then the coordination that it takes to match these people together. And if they haven't worked well together, and while it may seem like a simple issue, we have done this in the past and it just really hasn't worked well for us. It takes additional staff time to do all this coordination between the two vendors. And then we have potentially 2 people to point fingers at. So not the best position for us to be in. This vehicle is not an off-the-shelf vehicle. It's likely going to take 4 to 6 months to build out once we award it and receive it. And I want you to remember, we're replacing a 20-year-old piece of equipment here, past its useful life expectancy. If we do bid this separately, we're not really guaranteed to get any kind of local vendor of interest, out of San Mateo County. And there could be some issues with, it could take longer for us to build it out and actually receive it than the 4 to 6 months I mentioned before. To me, a little bit of this, the urgency is it's a bit of a safety risk to our employees. We do have the crane inspected annually to make sure it's operational. But again, remember, this is 20 years old. It's used to lift street lights and traffic poles by our staff. Then to add on to this, on our standard orders, we do solicit bids from local sources, and many times we award to those entities when they're better than the state pricing. So tonight, I highly recommend approval of this special vehicle, to support the work being done by our public works maintenance staff.
Thank you very much, Brad, for all that information. I really don't want to stand in the way of this if this is a necessary purchase. You mentioned safety, and yes, though it is 20 years old, I see that it only has 100,000 miles on it, but still, it gets different kinds of use than what we get on a car. So
Correct.
I understand that. So my interest is mostly the purchasing process over just this individual vehicle. And so thank you, Brad, for speaking. But I want to ask the council, because I have some information about how I think we might be able to do this better. And I'm interested in seeing if the council, if we could have a discussion, a study session, if you will, to discuss that. And I want to know if anybody's interested in that, and we could ask the city manager to weigh in also.
You're talking about a larger policy that we would adopt?
Right, exactly, which involves trying to target local purchasing and having second and third choices about purchasing, but first seeking to actually do business inside of our own local economy. Okay, so for instance, with this truck, I made a call today. I spoke with somebody in San Mateo County who would be interested in bidding. I described the whole product. They said, yes, we would be interested in bidding that. Okay, so I'm thinking that if we can actually help businesses in San Mateo County, okay, this particular provider is in Sacramento, and they have lower overhead. They can give a lower price because land's cheaper, housing is cheaper. A lot of things are different there. But how fair is that to the businesses that live here with us and the people that work there? Okay, these are the questions I have, and I'd like to have a discussion about it.
I think that is a valid point, and I think that a larger policy discussion really belongs at our February priorities meeting, because it seems like the kind of thing that would require the city attorney to develop language that would help us understand what contracts would go to that kind of process and how we would treat those various contracts. So, yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I just think that it needs to start from the council priority session, because it would take a lot of staff time to get to where you're talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That'll be on my list for that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing no public comment, I'll close the public comment period, bring it back to the council for a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you take roll?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Bonilla.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Rodriguez.
Aye.
Councilmember Lee.
Aye.
Councilmember Pappen.
Aye.
Mayor Gothels.
Aye. Okay, so that wraps up all of the consent items. Now we're on to public comment. At this time, members of the public who wish to address the council on something not on the agenda may speak at this time. Maximum of 3 minutes, and the total amount of time for public comment will be 15 minutes. We are not allowed under state law to answer any questions or address anything brought up during public comment. I see one public comment. If there's any other public comment, please raise your hands. At this time, I'll call on Patricia Husted. Go ahead, Patricia.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. First of all, congratulations to all the heroes of the quarter you mentioned and for all the work you do. I'm a retired nurse, 45 years, San Mateo resident. And recently, this is not pandemic or all the forest fires and all things that we're dealing with right now, but I'm just dealing with normal stuff that residents may deal with in a city. And I have had 4 months of trying to deal with approaching my neighbor, sending letters and all that, and then approaching the city with the inspectors and the coding enforcers and finding that I'm at wit's end because it's, phone call after phone call where, oh, we'll get back to you in a week, we'll get back to you a week, and it doesn't happen. So that's number one. Number two, I'm in the process of applying for an ADU, and I listened to your meeting on 3-2 with Philip Brennan, who I've spoken to in the past. And so I've applied for that, and then the permit is supposed to be processed by a certain date. I mean, as far as looking over it, and it doesn't happen, and I call, and they say, well, I'll get back to you, and then nobody gets back to me. So I'm just saying, I appreciate the issues that the city is dealing with, but I also appreciate knowing how can we work more effectively. I've had, for this little issue with the drain where it's causing water damage on my property, I've had 2 inspectors come out, and they say that now a coding enforcer has to come out, but that's been going on for over 2 months. And I want to get this taken care of before the rain. So I'm just saying, as a not important issue, I know in the scheme of things, but if I were a nurse doing this job, I'd be fired. I worked intensive care, I've worked hospitals, I just retired a few months ago, and I'm just really surprised by how kind everybody's been on the phone, but how no one has gotten back to me to take care of the problem, which is pretty simple. Not a hard thing to take care of. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Patricia, my email address is jgoethals@cityofsanmateo.org, jgoethals@cityofsanmateo.org. Please reach out offline outside of a meeting, and we can work together on your issues. Next public comment is Simone Blake. Simone, welcome.
Thank you. And this is my wife's computer. We have a 16-month-old, and he decided to use my computer as his fun toy. My name is Adili Skillen. Some of the members, council members may know me. And I am just here, and I wanted to speak on the cigarette and flavored tobacco regulations. I am a school teacher at Sequoia High School, and I'm a San Mateo resident, and just wanted to mention how important it is as a teacher, looking at the students that are coming to my classroom and how it is negatively affecting them, and how of great importance it is for me, as I just said, as a new father, not only for my students in the classroom, but as for my community. I work with the community. I work with Samaritan House at times, and Ruby is the bomb, just by the way. It's just so important that our community knows how detrimental that these are to our community, to our kids, and as a teacher, as I've seen in the classroom. So again, thank you, Council, and thank you, Mayor, for letting me have this time.
Dealey, thank you so much for your comments, and thank you for your work as a teacher. Appreciate it very much. We love our teachers. With that, I will close the public comment period, bring it back to the council, and move on to our next agenda item. Item number 17. Sean? Sean, we're not going to tell you.
I have unmuted. Thank you. Let me get my slideshow up here. And now, I guess I have to share my screen first. Can you see that?
Yes, that looks good, Sean.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Tonight, I'll be making this presentation on this item. And first, I'll give a background on what's happened to date, and then review the city's existing regulations on tobacco and smoking, and go over the requested regulations that the council heard some time ago. And then just very recently, a bill was passed by the legislature, signed by the governor. I'll go through that bill and the impact of that bill, and then some additional requests that have come from the advocates after the passage of that bill, and then review the direction that staff is seeking from the council. So with respect to the background on this item, in 2019, a group of concerned residents requested that the City Council consider adopting regulations to address the sale of flavored tobacco and electronic cigarettes, we call e-cigarettes, within the city. The council directed staff to research the legal issues associated with this request and then report back to the council for direction. Currently, the city does have within the municipal code limits on where smoking may occur. The code also requires retailers of tobacco products to obtain a permit. And with respect to the sale of tobacco products, limits sales, does not allow sales through self-service displays or through vending machines. That's the extent of our current regulations. The group that came to the council requested that the council enact a ban on flavored tobacco products, and within the heading of tobacco products include e-cigarettes as being a tobacco product, and for the ban to include mint and menthol flavor, and to prohibit the sale of tobacco products at pharmacies. At the end of just last month, the legislature passed SB 793, authored by San Mateo's Senator Jerry Hill. This bill prohibits the sale of flavored tobacco products, including e-cigarettes, and prohibits the flavors including menthol and mint. The statute does have exceptions for certain products, including tobacco smoked in a hookah device, loose leaf tobacco, and premium cigars as defined by the statute. Recently, I spoke with the representative of the advocacy group, Dr. Bonnie Halperin-Felsher, a pediatrics professor at Stanford and expert in the public health effects of children's use of e-cigarettes. And in that conversation, she did request, and I suspect that the group will request, that the council still enact its own local ban, which is allowed by the state legislation, on tobacco products in pharmacies, and to prohibit flavored products not prohibited by SB 793. And in addition, she raised a request that the city consider prohibiting the sale of e-cigarettes in the city completely. So tonight we'll be asking, staff will be seeking direction from the council on these questions. Should an ordinance for council consideration be drafted? And if so, what should be included in that ordinance? A ban on sales in pharmacies, a ban on flavored products allowed by SB 793, and a ban on the sale of e-cigarettes in the city. That concludes staff's presentation. I know that there are speakers who are interested to address the council on this item, including Dr. Halperin-Felsher, who will be speaking on behalf of the group.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions from council members before I go to comments from the public? Yes, Councilmember Pappen.
So I just, if you could go back, I'm unclear. It would be, should be included a ban on sale of tobacco. Oh, there, okay. So, and then SB 93 does not prohibit all flavored products. There are still some outstanding. Is that right? So what are those? And then,
So those are tobacco smoked in hookah, loose leaf tobacco.
that part I got, but it's the savor of flavored tobacco products, including e-cigarettes. So SB 93 does not include those. I'm just confused here. Sorry.
SB 793 does prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco products, and that includes e-cigarettes. So it prohibits flavored e-cigarettes, SB 793. It also includes within that, the flavors include menthol and mint. And then the exception, it does not ban flavored tobacco smoke used in hookahs or flavored loose leaf tobacco or flavored premium cigars.
And it doesn't ban the sale of tobacco products in pharmacies, right?
Correct. That's right.
And that's flavored, unflavored.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Oh, no. Oh, it's just regular tobacco as opposed to flavored is banned no matter what, right?
That's right. Except for the hookah, loose leaf, and premium cigars.
Okay. I just want to make sure I got a little.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions from council members? Seeing none just kidding. Councilmember Lee.
Sean, I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about the enforcement structures and that we have in place with the contract with the county, and then how enforcement will be handled at the city level, just to kind of frame up where there's been some changes there.
Sure. As I mentioned before, the city has a tobacco retailer's permit requirement, and so that's in our municipal code. So if a business wants to engage, any kind of business wants to engage in the sale of tobacco products, they need to obtain a permit to do so, a retailer permit to do so. That permitting process through arrangement with the county is actually administered by the county, but it is enacted by city law. And basically what that does is allows for registration of tobacco retailers. We know where they are, we know how many we have, but it doesn't really enact any specific conditions or requirements or prohibitions on the sale of types of tobacco, that type of thing. So, what it does provide is that if there are such things, either state or local law, that limit the sale of tobacco, say to minors or some other group, and there's a violation by a tobacco retailer who is registered in San Mateo. Under our code, the county is able to suspend that permit, and so during the time that the permitted retailer is under suspension, they're not able to sell tobacco. And several offenses could lead to even revocation of that permit. So that regulatory scheme exists. It provides an additional enforcement tool. So if you've got a retailer who's habitually violating rules about the sale of tobacco products, they could face suspension or revocation of their permit to do so. But each community has the legal authority to adopt additional restrictions, such as the ones that are requested here, banning sales in pharmacies and selling flavored tobacco products, that type of thing.
And Sean, you mentioned Dr. Halpern has a presentation. I'm going to go to that now.
I have one more question, Mr. Mayor, if I could, please.
Sure. Go ahead, Rick.
For Sean, I received an email today from Patricia McDaniel, who also is a researcher at UC and specializes in tobacco control. And I think this goes to why the city should enact its own legislation. I want to ask you about this. She says that a large tobacco company has already filed paperwork to start the process to put the legislation on hold until the 2022 ballot via the referendum. So, in other words, the state legislation could be defeated at the poll at some point. And I think, is it true then that the reason why we're being asked to enact our own ordinance would be because it cannot be overcome by a ballot measure on the state ballot?
Sure, that would be a reason. to have our own independent regulation is because state laws, just like city ordinances, are subject to referendum. So if there was a successful referendum on a statute, that's at the state level. That state law is then repealed, and we're back in a situation where if the city had enacted its own independent ordinance, that ordinance would be enforceable within the city limits.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
I just have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Babin.
Could it be challenged? Could ours be challenged too? And we could be sued?
It could be subject to a referendum, right? So any ordinance that the city council adopts could be subject to a referendum. They're very rare, but requires circulation of a petition within 30 days of the adoption of the ordinance. But there's that political process, and there certainly is the possibility of a lawsuit to challenge any law that the city passes. There was in Palo Alto. I know that earlier this year, the city of Palo Alto enacted a ban on flavored tobacco products and were sued by a local retailer. From the reporting on that lawsuit, it didn't seem to me that the arguments were very compelling in terms of the arguments that were quoted in the report as to what why the businesses suing the city were suing. But certainly anytime the council passes a law that has impacts on folks, litigation is a possibility.
I had a follow-up question about the enforcement. So, is any additional measures that we take through by ordinance, would that fall to our contract with the county to enforce, or would it then be it would fall under our own code enforcement and be complaint driven as a matter of our own sort of operational capacity?
So the primary response in terms of if we passed a flavored tobacco ban and there was a retailer that was violating that prohibition, the primary enforcement would fall to the city in terms of we would receive the complaint, and our enforcement staff, whether it's code enforcement or the police department, would then go out and determine whether or not prohibited products are being sold, and we would then follow through. And I would envision, like almost all of our code provisions, it would operate on a complaint basis. So we respond to complaints as opposed to establishing a proactive program to going out and investigating and inspecting all tobacco retailers in the city. So I imagine we'd respond to complaints and then attempt to achieve compliance, which is our standard practice for code violations. Educate the retailer that these products are no longer may be sold, and so give them an opportunity to correct if they don't follow through with enforcement action. If we did, so the initial burden of doing that work would be on the city. If we did follow through and either impose an administrative citation, which would be possible, or cite them as an infraction or a misdemeanor, most likely first offense, we'd go an infraction route, and the retailer was convicted, then that information would be provided to the county, and the county could use that as a basis for suspending the permit, as I mentioned before, that permit process. And if the permit is then suspended, another tool, an enforcement tool, is now you can't even sell tobacco at all, while that permit is being suspended.
Councilmember Pappen.
I have one more question. If we enacted one that banned the tobacco in pharmacies, but you relied on the state for the other ones until if it gets challenged, then obviously we'd consider it. But is it that we would enforce the state ones if we have a retailer that's not complying with SB 793? Or is that just the state comes in and does that?
No, that's like most laws that the state passed, they're enforced locally. Like most of the criminal cases are enforced
Oh,
by our
okay.
police. So it would be enforced by the city.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Halperin.
Hi, well, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and share. Oh, said
Let
I
me
suddenly
stop
cannot
sharing.
share.
There
Oh,
you go.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, while I'm pulling this up to save time, I just first of all want to thank everybody for allowing me to present today. Also want to congratulate all the heroes in San Mateo, and thank you again for giving me this opportunity to present to you. And thank you to our city attorney for presenting and setting the stage. So my name is Bonnie Halpern-Felsher. I'm a professor of pediatrics in adolescent medicine at Stanford University. I'm also the founder and executive director of the Tobacco Prevention Toolkit. I'm also a resident of San Mateo and a mother of 2 young adults. I do want to disclose that I am an expert scientist in some e-cigarette litigation and obviously involved in a lot of tobacco-related policies, including this one and for SB 793. So I think it was laid out nicely what the group I'm speaking on behalf of is looking for. It is to update, first of all, the definition of tobacco products to include all tobacco products, including e-cigarettes, prohibit the sale of all e-cigarettes and then all flavored tobacco without exemptions, prohibit the sale of all tobacco products in pharmacies, and then include restrictions or expectations for permitted tobacco retailers as was outlined. So I want to present the research as to why we are so concerned about these issues. I want to first show you some brand new data that came out just actually about 2-3 weeks ago, national data on tobacco use. And this is from the National Youth Risk Behavior Survey and showing past 30-day use. So this is asking people whether or not you use in the past 30 days any of these products. 33% have said that they've used an e-cigarette. That is up dramatically. In 2017 to 2018, we saw the first huge spike in 78% increase in the number of high school students who are saying that they're using an e-cigarette and 48% increase in the number of middle school students. Last year, that number went up again, and now we're seeing the number even higher at almost 33%. Huge number of teenagers are using these products. And by the way, they're starting as young as 10 years old. About 6% use cigarettes, and similarly lower numbers for the other tobacco products. However, we do know, and new data came out, that if you use an e-cigarette as a teenager, you are about 3.5 times more likely to then move on to cigarettes. So we're seeing this effect going on with multiple products. The overall tobacco use amongst adolescents has not changed over the years, despite the decrease in cigarettes, and we're at about 36.5%. So if you haven't seen them, I'm sure you have. These are some different e-cigarette products. I won't go into all the dynamics of each of these. I'm happy to if anybody has questions on them. The most popular, as you know, are the Juul that I'm circling here. Really is the product that we're most concerned about for increasing or causing this youth epidemic. But now we're very concerned about these puff bars, Soren, and a lot of the other products. Just a little bit of the science behind these and why we're so concerned. The ones on the right are the so-called older e-cigarette products. I say older. E-cigarettes came on the market in the US in 2007. Came on the market looking like cigarettes. They weren't very popular. And then we have the one on the right, which are these mods. They're modifiable products, e-cigarettes. They're larger. They can't be hidden in your palm. You see this a lot with younger adults and adults. And these are the products that give you that huge plume of smoke. They don't have as much nicotine. They have about 25 milligrams of nicotine. The ones we're most concerned with more recently are the ones on the left, Juul, Puff Bar, and so on. These have at least 41 milligrams of nicotine, upwards of almost 70. I'll explain how much that is. I do want to emphasize, though, as was stated in the group I'm representing, our desire for e-cigarettes to also be considered a tobacco product within the city of San Mateo. This is incredibly important. Despite the pushback that I get a lot where they say e-cigarettes are not tobacco, they have nicotine in them. All of the new products have nicotine in them. Nicotine is derived by tobacco. Don't let the other side tell you that it's tomatoes or potatoes. It takes probably 1,000 tomatoes or potatoes to give you one cigarette. these are tobacco products, and even the Food and Drug Administration, and to be honest, even the e-cigarette companies call themselves tobacco products. They are. So I want to go to this, what we call in our shop, the cigs in a pod, just to give you an idea why we're so worried and how much nicotine is in there. If you are a smoker or ever were a smoker, know people who are smokers, you probably realize that a pack of cigarettes has about 20 cigarettes in them. Each cigarette has 8 milligrams of nicotine, but we don't inhale all 8, we inhale about 1. So a pack of cigarettes is about 20 cigarettes, about 20 milligrams. Juul pod, which is what we're most worried about right now with teenagers, has 41 milligrams of nicotine. On the website, they used to say that you get at least 80% into your body. If you simply do the math, 1 Juul pod, if you finish that, is the equivalent to almost 41 cigarettes, almost 2 packs of cigarettes, 1.5 to 2. You asked me how much are teenagers using? Teenagers who are addicted, who talk to me, tell me they're using anywhere from 1 to 4 pods a day. That's anywhere from 1 to 8 packs of cigarettes in a day. Puff Bar, the newer product that's on the market in the last few months, is 650 cigarettes worth of nicotine, and Soren is close to 90, partly because it's just a bigger volume. Tremendous amount of nicotine. Not only that, but the kind of nicotine is salt-based nicotine that I showed you in the slide before, which is you don't have the throat hit. So you don't inhale it and it doesn't cause pain in your lungs like a cigarette or some of the older e-cigarette products do. So your teenagers are able to inhale it, not get that throat hit, not get the pain, get a tremendous amount of nicotine that goes to the brain and through their body very, very quickly and gets them addicted. We have so many teenagers who are addicted who are contacting me all the time. So other reasons why we worry about their health, if you don't know, those who are teachers in the audience certainly know that the adolescent brain and continues to develop until until about age 25. That's great for a lot of reasons, learning, language, things like that. But it also means that while the brain is developing, the brain is looking for cues of what things in the brain, the receptors, the synapses to keep and what to put away. We're born with the ability to become addicted, but we lose those nicotine receptors if we don't add nicotine to our bodies. When we do, the brain says, I'm going to keep those nicotine receptors and pop up and be ready to grab onto more nicotine. So if we start using nicotine under age 25, we are so much more likely to become addicted, so much so that the e-cigarette and tobacco industries overall know this. We also know that the heart beats faster. We also know about lungs. I'm going to talk about lungs quickly. And I am sprinting, I apologize, but I promise I'd stay within my 15 minutes. The lungs, there's lots and lots of new evidence now that e-cigarettes harm the lungs. We know that e-cigarettes harms the lungs in terms of changing your immune system and actually affecting the lungs and the heart, by the way. We also know that COVID and other respiratory ailments influence the lungs. You put these two together and you're looking for a disaster. We know, and I actually published a study recently you may have heard of, that shows, national study, that if you are a vapor or a smoker, you are significantly more likely to be diagnosed with COVID-19. So we don't know if it's only the lungs. We also know that teenagers share their product. We published papers on this before. I'm happy to send you any papers. Teens share their products. So even during sheltering in place, they may be in their backyard, sharing their vaping products, taking their mask off, and increasing the likelihood of getting sick. So that's why now, despite all the other issues right now with COVID, with our heat wave, with our fire, why these are still important for us to regulate today. You've heard about flavors, a little shock and awe, but just to show you all the flavors that are available in e-cigarettes across the board. And you may or may not know this, but there are 15,000 unique flavors of electronic cigarettes. I get a lot of people from the vaping industry who say to me, adults need these flavors to stop smoking cigarettes. Well, first of all, there's absolutely no evidence. There's actually contrary evidence that e-cigarettes help adults quit smoking. If anything, it just prolongs your cigarette smoking and use of both products. But not only that, but I'm sorry, things like banana butt and honey doo-doo and dragon's blood Those are not adult flavors. These are meant to attract kids, and there's no doubt about that. Here's how they're packaged. These are flavors attracting kids. But if it's not enough just to look at e-cigarettes, it's true for all the tobacco products. Smokeless tobacco, cigars, hookah, all these others come in beautiful rainbow of flavors and colors that attract kids. These are not our starters for adults. Now, cigarettes are not allowed to actually talk about flavors anymore since the 2009 FDA Congressional Act, but the colors on these packs show us the flavors that's within them, and that's another problem. So do flavors target kids? We published a study in 2018 where we asked teenagers, are these ads for you? Someone a little younger, someone a little older, someone a lot older. And overwhelmingly, the teenagers said these are for them and people younger. Very few, maybe fewer than 20%, about 10 to 15% said these are for any adults. Even things like the beer, the liquor, and the coffee, teens said they're attracting me, my age as a teenager. We also know from national data that teens are using products with flavors. Fruit and menthol are the highest level, the most likely flavors to be used. A lot of people say mint and menthol are not kid flavors. Sure they are. They love gum. They love mint. They love menthol, and they're using those flavors. Mint and menthol have to be included in any flavor regulation and flavor ban that we do. So we know that the data show that youth are using flavored tobacco products. And by the way, they also tell us in our studies and others that if these products did not have flavors, they would not use them. We also know flavors themselves harm the lungs and the heart. So there's clear evidence it's not just the nicotine, it's not just the propylene glycol and all the other constituents that are in e-cigarettes and other tobacco, but the flavors themselves, the buttery flavors, the cinnamon flavors, the vanillin, all of those hurt you. Let me just quickly touch upon access for the next 2 minutes. This is a picture taken in the Bay Area, student discounts. The law right now in not only California, which was earlier than federal, but the laws are that at 21 is the legal age to purchase any tobacco product. When you say student discount, the majority of people who are over 21 are no longer students. This is targeting, again, our kids in our community. We know from national data, including some data that we have, that about 62% of licensed tobacco retailers sold e-cigarettes, and a lot of them are selling Juul, and a lot of the teens are getting their products from brick and mortar stores. And they're not being age verified. At least 25% are not. And we know this in San Mateo, where I've gotten phone calls, because I am a parent here, from friends, from parents saying some of the stores in our neighborhood are selling to under 18 and under 21. In California, we also know that teenagers are more likely to get these products from brick and mortar stores. We also know if you ask a teen, and I have a 20-year-old who was in Aragon High School during the big boom of e-cigarettes. And I said, how easy is it for your friends to get these products? Oh, Mom, it's so easy, and they can get any flavor they want, and they know how. So in sum, you've got a perfect storm to addict youth, which is our main concern. And when we say youth, we mean 21 and under, not just little kids. You've got highly addictive products, stealth products that are the type of nicotine that's made to addict kids. You've got misperceptions. They don't understand how harmful these are. They don't even understand that these products contain nicotine, the flavors and the packaging, and they're cheap. So at the federal level, the FDA does have the authority to regulate and enforce their 2009 law, but they're just not doing it. In January 2020, this year, they said that they were going to use their enforcement discretion, regulatory discretion, to focus on the cartridge base. So those are like Juul, and only flavors except tobacco and menthol. Menthol is not just a flavor, it's a flavorant used in a lot of products. So if flavors like menthol are allowed, a lot of other flavors are therefore also allowed. The FDA is not prioritizing open systems like Soren or Puff Bar that are becoming more and more popular. You hear, and teens are telling me this too, the feds are playing whack-a-mole. They pretend to focus on one product and a bunch of other products come up. Picture I took of products from a school district. I work a lot with schools in the East Bay. A teacher gave me all the products he confiscated in his school district. This was pre-COVID, of course, and I took a picture, and you can see the puff bars. These products are not regulated by the FDA, and these are hugely used by our teens. We do know at the state, we talked about SB 793, looked at over 80 cities and counties in California have also taken measures, including many on the screen near us. So opposing arguments that adults need the flavors to quit, no, they don't. There's no evidence. That adults need e-cigarettes to quit smoking, no. And actually, for every one adult who quits, 80 start. E-cigarettes are not tobacco cessation devices. If they were, then they could submit it to the FDA to be a cessation device. They've not done that. There's a lot of concern sometimes in cities and counties about loss of revenue, but there's no evidence. If anything, teenagers and adults will just buy locally other things. They'll buy pizza, they'll buy other things in their city. And to be honest, most of the tobacco money doesn't stay in the city or the county anyway. That youth don't purchase from retail shops. They do, and they're not being age verified. There's this whole thing with SB 793 that it's racially discriminating and penalizing particularly Black people, who are the ones most targeted by menthol and mint marketing. And that's not true. None of these policies, and the ones that we're proposing for the city of San Mateo, are not to penalize or criminalize the buyer. It's to focus on the seller. And we already talked about. So just a final slide, we're really just asking for the city of San Mateo to mirror the county ordinance with the following. And I thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Dr. Halperin, or should we go to public comment first? Seeing none, I'll go to public comment. We have 5, 6, 7, probably going to be at least 10. Let's try to keep public comment to 1 or 2 minutes, starting with Jen Grand-Lahano.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Jen Grand-Lahano. I am from the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. I'm the Northern California Government Relations Director. And tonight, let's see, I just want to thank you for taking on this issue of policy solutions to address youth tobacco use in your city. So the consensus of the public health community is that it's flavors that are driving the epidemic of tobacco use among teenagers. And the best way to address that epidemic is to remove flavors from retail tobacco sellers. Comprehensive retail policies are a proven strategy to help reduce youth access to tobacco products, which can help protect kids from a lifetime of addiction to a deadly product. Governor Newsom signed SB 793 to end the sale of flavored tobacco products recently, and we had a whole weekend to celebrate that before the tobacco industry filed a referendum, which would tie up this bill until approved by voters in the November 2022 election, instead of going into play as it would have on January 1st. The industry will always focus its efforts at the state and federal level, leaving our best chance to combat their predatory marketing at the local level right here, where you, our policymakers, have the power to take comprehensive action now. So tonight we ask you to direct staff to draft the strongest policy possible to protect youth from a lifetime of addiction through flavored tobacco products. So a minimum for a strong tobacco policy would be to have a tobacco retail license, which you already have at the local level, but I just heard that it's complaint-based. And so we would recommend having a minimum of 1 to 2 annual inspections for each local tobacco retailer, which would establish a level playing field for all stores regardless of complaints. And then, of course, to end the sale of all flavored tobacco products, including flavored e-cigarettes, menthol cigarettes, candy-flavored cigars and cigarillos, hookah, and would apply to all stores that sell tobacco with no exemptions for adult-only stores or hookah lounges.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Shanice Stevenson, welcome.
Hi, thank you. How long do I have just to make sure I understand?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Thank you so much for giving me time. I work for the Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council, where I do the project manager for the tobacco prevention program and doing education with youth, particularly African American youth. And so I'm here to talk a little bit about African American youth in our community who are disproportionately advertised to regarding flavored tobacco, particularly menthol. It is disproportionately advertised in communities of color due to its long history of aggressive marketing and targeting to our community using things like cools and things of that sort. This is personally something that I'm passionate about, as my mother is dealing with COPD and long years of smoking due to that, and particularly menthol, which is particularly African-American individuals are susceptible to that. It makes it easier. And we don't even know that it's damaging our lungs because of the cooling effect of that. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that and how it impacts our youth, that 80% of young people who have used tobacco started because of flavored tobacco. And I'm so happy that people have talked a lot about the flavors, particularly mint and menthol, as it relates to our community. And then lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about how San Mateo County Office of Education and San Mateo County Superintendent of Schools on November 6, 2000, due to the pandemic, have written a resolution supporting and commending the efforts of the county and municipals and school districts to reduce the availability and use of e-cigarettes by youth in San Mateo County. And that includes restricting the sales of tobacco. And then lastly, wanted to just make sure that you knew that San Mateo Foster City School District joined Cabrillo and Jefferson School District, along with San Mateo County Office of Ed, and suing Jules, one of the #1 companies in our area, on December 2019, due to the impact of what it has done for students. High schools are now providing cessation programs related to vaping and other things, and doing a lot of education. So it's costing our education system a lot, because that's how kids are dealing with their stress. That's how they're dealing with many different things. And as many surveys have said, they say that it's very easy to get the access through stores. And so I just wanted to make sure that you had that information from us. And if you have any questions, I already turned in last week or the week before some support letters. But I did want to bring to your attention that there is a resolution from the County Office of Education and the San Mateo County Superintendents of Schools.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bob Gordon.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, council members. My name is Bob Gordon. I'm a member of the San Mateo County Tobacco Education Coalition. And I want to commend the council for considering these provisions. And I'll talk a little bit about the tobacco-free pharmacy provision. The city of San Mateo can join 44 other jurisdictions in California that have already ended the sale of every tobacco product in every pharmacy. And my count shows 11 pharmacies in San Mateo currently. That count is based on the licensees of the California Board of Pharmacy. So the policy would eliminate all tobacco retail licenses at all pharmacies, and pharmacies are typically divided into 4 types of pharmacies: the independent pharmacies like Ted's Village Pharmacy, drugstores like Rite Aid, Walgreens, CVS, grocery stores with a pharmacy inside like Safeway, and big box stores with a pharmacy inside like Target. And the courts have determined that no exemptions are allowed. All pharmacy types must be included. Now, among the 45 California jurisdictions that have already ended the sale of tobacco in all pharmacies are 8 policies in San Mateo County. The 8 jurisdictions that have already instituted tobacco-free pharmacies in San Mateo County are Daly City, unincorporated San Mateo, Portola Valley, Half Moon Bay, San Carlos, South San Francisco, Menlo Park, and East Palo Alto. And finally, community members and their elected leaders do have the power to decide that local pharmacies will not sell tobacco, and therefore the power to change what a pharmacy is for a whole new generation of young people. Cigarettes and pharmacies don't mix, so thank you for considering these policies to help improve the health of San Mateo residents.
Thank you, Bob. I think I was part of the TEC at one point 20 years ago. Patricia McDaniel.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. I'm a tobacco control researcher at the University of California, San Francisco. I'm also a city resident. And I would encourage you to adopt an ordinance that mirrors the ordinance in San Mateo County. In 2018, the county banned the sale of flavored tobacco and e-cigarette products only. But 2 years later, the county decided to impose a ban on the sale of all e-cigarettes, citing continued youth access to e-cigarettes and the failure of the FDA to analyze their safety and whether or not they had any public health benefit. The county noted that it was not content to continue to wait before addressing for its residents what appears from the evidence to be a major public health crisis. The city of San Mateo should also not be content to wait, particularly as recent research has shown that vaping may increase the risk of contracting COVID-19. I also wanted to address some of the concerns raised by the city council that the city might be sued for adopting these ordinances. And I wanted to point out that lawsuits brought by retailers in Southern California against flavored tobacco bans have been dismissed by the courts. And I wanted to also point out that there's a great deal of public support for these kinds of tobacco control interventions. There was a study done by the California Tobacco Control Program in 2018 that found that 63% of adult Californians supported flavored tobacco bans. There's a great deal of support as well among young adults for a ban on e-cigarettes. And in fact, there's a great deal of support among Californians for a proposal that's not even on the table yet, a gradual ban on the sale of all cigarettes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Tricia Barr, welcome.
Hi. Oops. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Tricia Barr, and I'm a parent of 3 school-aged kids. I'm also a PTA member advocate and on the high school site council. I'm a volunteer co-chair for the San Mateo County Tobacco Education Coalition. And I'm one of the parents who was at the council pre-COVID speaking on this topic. So thanks so much for bringing this to the council's agenda. From a school and youth perspective, and because of the increase in the use of tobacco products has been such an issue in our schools, as we heard earlier from the Sequoia teacher, the California State PTA adopted a resolution this summer urging legislation at all levels, the state and local levels, prohibiting the sale, marketing, and distribution of flavored tobacco products and e-cigarettes, including the components, accessories, and tobacco flavor enhancers. Regarding SB 793, I know there were some questions there around the exemptions, and Senator Hill reluctantly accepted those exemptions in order to progress his bill through the legislative process. But San Mateo should not allow those same exemptions. They were not welcome exemptions. And Senator Hill started with and wanted a stronger bill like the one we're urging you to pass. So others have mentioned the 80 other cities and counties within California that have developed ordinances here. So please don't let San Mateo fall behind, and please develop a strong ordinance that mirrors the county ordinance. So really, we're just asking you to mirror the county's ordinance by prohibiting the sale of all e-cigarettes and flavored tobacco without exemptions and prohibiting the sale of all tobacco products in pharmacies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tricia. And I'm going to go next to Amaya. Amaya, you are next, and thank you for providing your pronouns.
Good evening, Council. My name is Amaya Wooding, and I co-chair Proudly Against Tobacco, the Bay Area's LGBTQ plus tobacco control coalition. LGBTQ use tobacco more because it's readily available as a coping mechanism for dealing with stressors unique to our community, such as homophobia and transphobia. We can also see this use pattern among San Mateo Union High School District students, where California Healthy Kids Survey data shows LGBTQ freshmen were over twice as likely to report using an e-cigarette in the last month as their non-LGBTQ peers, and twice as likely to report feeling sad or hopeless in the past year. What this shows us, in other words, is that they're sad, they're stressed out, and they know that tobacco is available. And even SB 793 doesn't necessarily make tobacco unavailable because it's weak without compliance checks. As mentioned, those checks are largely dependent on local authority, and we can learn lessons from the last time that the state passed a policy about what didn't work. So 4 years ago, we raised the tobacco purchasing age from 18 to 21, but a survey of 1,500 young adults who were between 18 and 20 at the time found that they were still able to go to the store and come out with tobacco products if they wanted them. The problem was that irregular or infrequent compliance checks did not create consequences for retailers that disincentivize illegal sales. So that disincentive comes from consequences that are imposed by local tobacco retail licenses, which should already be priced by the administering agency so as to produce a pool of funds for regular compliance checks. This is how the vast majority of, yes, the 80-odd cities and counties in our state that have already banned flavors do it, and we know that it's much harder for teens to illegally buy tobacco products in communities where these permits do pay for those compliance checks. Please keep this in mind. Thank you.
Romaya, thank you so much for your comments. Myra Amador.
Good evening, council members. My name is Myra Amador, and I'm with San Mateo County Health's Tobacco Prevention Program. And tonight I'd like to provide some tobacco-related educational information. The County of San Mateo, Half Moon Bay, San Carlos, Portola Valley, Burlingame, Menlo Park, and East Palo Alto restrict the sale of all flavored tobacco, including menthol and mint-flavored tobacco products, and flavored hookah in all retail stores. As we've heard, flavorings mask the harsh taste of tobacco, which makes it easier for youth to initiate tobacco use. Additionally, all these jurisdictions, except for Burlingame, restrict tobacco products in pharmacies in order to reduce youth access and promote public health. Furthermore, on November 12, 2019, the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors adopted an ordinance that restricts the sale and distribution of e-cigarettes, even if they are not flavored. Menlo Park, South San Francisco, and East Palo Alto have also restricted the sale of e-cigarettes in an effort to protect the health of all community members from these harmful products. Our program has provided assistance to cities that have adopted tobacco-related policies, and we are available to support the city of San Mateo as well if this is the direction that the council decides to take. This may include support with providing retailer and community education prior to the enforcement date. For example, sending letters to retailers to let them know about the ordinance, as well as responding to calls or emails from retailers to provide more information and answer questions they may have. I hope this information is helpful, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Myra. Blythe Young.
Sorry about that. Good evening. My name is Blythe Young. I'm the Community Advocacy Director for the American Heart Association. And I wanted to emphasize the need for local control for flavored tobacco and the complement of a strong TRL in San Mateo. San Mateo needs a comprehensive policy that covers all flavors and all products and goes above and beyond SB 793. As we know, policy is only as strong as its enforcement, and it would be best complemented by an update to your TRL that would require a fee that would be adequate enough to cover enforcement. In addition, to have a minimum number of compliance checks and rechecks within a specified time frame. And lastly, to specify that the fines in the event of a violation should be levied on the licensee or owner. And then I just want to speak a little bit about SB 793 and what can happen if we don't take action at the local level. We can't afford to wait for 2 years to let youth be exposed while the industry spends millions to delay the meaningful progress made by 793. Even if the tobacco industry does not win on the ballot, simply collecting the signatures, in which they have plenty of money to pay per signature, would move the issue to 2022 and delay implementation for 2 years. So I just want to thank the council for having the study session and listening to Dr. Bonnie and considering passing a comprehensive flavors policy, and you'll be receiving a letter of support from us as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all the speakers. I will close the public comment period at this point and bring it back to the council. Any questions or comments, Councilmember Patton?
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank all the speakers and all of the presentations. I think I'm the only council mother that's got a teenager here. So, and Dr. Halpern, I probably share some of your experiences. It's been very interesting for me, I will tell you, to see some of these people that I knew as kindergartners who may have taken an interest in vaping. So I appreciate the presentation. My questions were really geared towards the legalities of it all. And I think our final speaker really spoke to this idea that we could be behind the 8 ball if they do gather enough signatures. So I'm concerned about that, and I'm concerned about a 2-year hiatus. So if it's okay with the council, I would propose that we take a look at doing what the county has done and mirroring theirs. But I'm confused. Do they also ban tobacco in pharmacies, or would that be something we'd add in addition to the county? They already do it? Rick, you're shaking your head, Dr.
Bonnie's shaving your head, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so it is that if we mirrored the county, we would be doing that as well, correct? Okay.
I don't know if I'm allowed to speak unless I'm called on.
I understand. No. And you're correct. You have our procedures correct. But yeah, I think I'm not prepared to risk a 2-year hiatus on this. So I'd like to get the ball rolling. My questions were really geared towards the legalities of it. And there could be a 2-year hiatus, and I don't want to see that. As the mother of a teenager. There's a lot of things I don't want to say as a mother of a teenager, but we don't have time for those.
Let me clarify that if Councilmember Pappen ever asks you a question, you are most certainly allowed to answer. And I appreciate Diane's comments. I tend to agree that we don't want to wait 2 years, that this is a critical issue for public health for all of our kids. And so my direction would be to council, to the staff, to bring back an ordinance that's all encompassing. Anybody else feel strongly?
I would agree, and I think that for me, the question still is about enforcement, and I appreciate some of the speakers offering community support to do public education and potentially to have eyes on the ground as well. I'm worried that with 793, sort of influx, there is a possibility that the market will be flooded, and that there will be a lot of people trying to unload a lot of inventory on the cheap, and so I think that in addition to the imperative to act now and not wait for the state, I think that I would want to see an enforcement plan that could be folded in, and if we could do that in partnership in assessing our own capacity. We are limited with the resources that we have, and where there could be tie-ins at the community level, that would be a great direction to go, in my opinion.
Rick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My only regret is that this is but a study session tonight, because yes, I'd like to vote to enact the full ban right now. Additionally, I just want to remind somebody something I say every time we discuss this subject, which is there is no such thing as a right to smoke. Okay? We all have our right to be healthy, right? And we should support that for everybody. And by supporting this, I am certainly doing that. And everybody else can too. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Deputy Mayor Rodriguez.
Thank you. I'll make it quick. I agree. I concur with all the comments. I think we should move on this as fast as possible.
All right. To staff, do you have clear direction?
Yes, we do.
Thank you, Sean. Excellent. Then I'll close this item and move on to our next item, which is item 18, our COVID-19 update. Number 15. Drew, are you getting set up? We have a presentation.
Yes. You all able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, so this week's update, I'm going to start with the health order. So last Monday, the state put in place a new framework titled Blueprint for a Safer Economy, and it's a tiered ranking system for the counties based on the case count and the positivity rate of those cases. And San Mateo County, along with most counties in California, are in purple tier 1, which means there is continued widespread risk for COVID-19 transmission. Now, as part of this new framework, the state did make some changes to businesses that were allowed to open. So our hair salons and barbershops have been allowed to go back indoors with some modifications. Nail salons are still not able to operate indoors, and shopping centers have been allowed indoors at 25% capacity. So as I mentioned, we are in the purple tier, and in order to move to the red tier, which is substantial risk as opposed to widespread risk, we need to have, as a county, fewer than 7 daily new cases per 100,000 population and less than 8% test positivity rate for 2 consecutive weeks. And as of the data as of August 31st, the county is seeing 7.7 daily new cases per 100,000 and a 5.2% positivity rate. And in addition, in order to move down, even when you meet those numbers, you also have to meet some state identified health equity measures, which are still in the process of being developed. And as I mentioned, the majority of California is in the purple tier at this point. Operationally, Parks and Recreation still providing a lot of support for distance learning. The full day program at King has been going for about 3 weeks now. It's been going pretty well. It's currently serving 50 children, including 20 PAL families. We're looking to expand capacity at the King Center by about 14 students and then accommodate an additional 24 at the Senior Center, pending staffing capacity. Parks and Rec is collaborating with the library on potential having the library potentially provide some staffing resources and some special programming. Tutoring services are being provided to the students through financial support of the Police Activities League. And the San Mateo Foster City School District is providing breakfast and lunch for anyone under 18 who is in need. So a lot of collaboration, a lot of community partnerships going on to make this program happen. And it's, like I said, going well so far. Staying with Parks and Recreation, we have the new rules that are requiring permits for groups of greater than 5 at the fields has been generally effective in keeping the large groups from congregating, so that's good. The permit use for our youth sports is also taking some of that weekend capacity at the fields as well. Certain park amenities are still closed based on the state's health orders. Unfortunately, we're not able to open up the playgrounds or the group picnic areas at this point. And we have been issuing some permits for the fitness centers that have had to move outdoors. We've issued 5 permits for them to do fitness programs in the parks and have 1 pending. And then finally, operationally, the city manager's office is coordinating with the county on a mobile COVID-19 testing site in North Central. It would be targeted specifically for neighborhood residents. We're working with the Home Association of North Central San Mateo to secure a location and coordinate a communications and outreach plan. The date and time is still pending, but we are working to get that up and running as soon as possible. We're also coordinating with community development, public works, and the police department to address some safety concerns with the parklets that we have downtown for the restaurants. We're working on developing construction guidelines for built parklets and designing some safety upgrades. And we are requiring that some businesses modify the parklets that they did build on their own to address some safety concerns that we've had. And in terms of council confirmation for actions taken in response to the local emergency proclamation, there are none this week. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Drew. And thank you again for the King Center and the distance learning hubs. It's been a lifesaver for my family and so many other families that I know in the area. So I had a question about the parklets, and I think this is coming back to us later, but I wanted to just kind of better understand when we're creating the guidelines for parklets. Are we keeping in mind that, that we want to create regulations that will allow for outdoor use through the rainy season? So thinking about how, outdoor dining might be a marathon, not a sprint. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're not throwing up any barriers to that in that maybe like, are we factoring in seasonality and the weather components, because, the restrictions on rooftops, and it seems to me very onerous, especially if we're trying to keep those businesses, in place throughout the rainy season and the change in weather.
Well, as you know, we are coming back, we're planning to come back to the council meeting on September the 21st to talk about sort of the long-term plan with the parklets, but to address, the issue you bring up. I mean, first and foremost, we are looking to make sure the parklets are safe for the restaurants, their employees, and the customers. And with something that you're building out in the street, you have to be considerate of conflicts with vehicles, which we've had a couple, and we've been fortunate that neither of the conflicts with vehicles have resulted in any injuries. But in one case, that was only because there weren't anyone in the parklet at the time. And we're working with the building folks to determine what can be done. But at this point, we have not found a way to safely put up a roof at one of these parklets that could withstand the impact of a vehicle and not fall over. And so, there are umbrellas, there are tents that are allowable. I think we are looking to work with the restaurants as much as possible to allow them to continue to operate. We want to support the restaurants. We want to, make sure that they can operate, and that if we want to take this past, through the winter season, to be able to do so as best as possible, but also as safely as possible.
Any follow-up? Or Councilmember Pappen?
I just have one, you went by it very quickly, but if you'll allow and indulge me to highlight, I found it amazing that PAL is using its own resources because they are cutting back on their programming due to COVID, and instead using those resources for tutoring. And I understand that the tutoring is being done by credentialed teachers. So just an amazing accoutrement to an already amazing program. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. And yes, I did move through it very quickly. And, between Parks and Recreation and PAL and the library and the school district, it has been an amazing collaboration to provide this service for the students and their parents, to allow parents to get back to work and students to have a safe environment to do their distance learning in.
And we are all very proud. Other council members before I go to public comment? Yes, Rick.
Mr. Mayor, I don't really have a question because I've been aware of everything that we're talking about here right now. But I do want to just comment on the amazing ability of our city manager to constantly improve and expand and make this program better to help our businesses be able to survive through tough times right now. And I'm glad to know that he's looking at what we can do through the winter. I think it is a difficult issue because of the car impacts. So I appreciate that thought, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
I mean, it's not that big a deal. It's 2020, pandemic, recession, most wildfires in the history of California, over 2 million acres, heat wave, locusts coming next week. I hope you're preparing for that, Drew. Drew looks well rested. I don't know. You must be delegating an awful lot.
I am. I appreciate the credit, but it really belongs with city staff who've done an amazing job to really meet the needs of our community throughout the last 6 months through really unprecedented times. So the credit goes to staff, definitely.
You've got a great team.
Absolutely.
Public comment. Raise your hand quickly. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment period. Lisa Teeler got in just before the wire. Lisa, join us.
Good evening. Lisa Teeler, Executive Director of the Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council. I just want to thank the City Council and the Mayor and City Manager for your support and influence to get mobile testing for COVID to North Central San Mateo. And we stand ready to help any way that we can, along with the other community organizations in the area. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We appreciate partnering with you always. I will close the public comment period, bring it back to the council. Any final comments? And Drew, you didn't ask for any direction whatsoever, so we just keep it up. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, item 19, new business. Item 19 is actually being pulled and put on a future agenda. Is that right, Drew?
That's correct, yes.
Any idea when?
Because we're doing that, do you think we could take a 2-minute or 3-minute break?
Yes, we can. Let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay, thank you.
You know what? We're going to reconvene at 9 p.m. 9 p.m., 6 minutes. 2, 3, 4.
We're always waiting for Rick?
Not always.
Okay, we're all here. That's a quorum. So welcome back, and we will start our meeting. Item 19 is going over to a future meeting in October. What do you think, Drew?
We received a letter today from a lawyer regarding the action. We want to have an opportunity to evaluate that. So we'll bring it back as quickly as we can. I would guess it will probably be the first meeting in October.
Great. Okay, we look forward to that then. Moving on to item 20, safe gun storage ordinance. Sean Mason, I turn it over to you.
Okay. Am I unmuted? Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah. I can hear you, see you, everything.
Great. All right. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, for this item, I will review the origin of the proposed ordinance, talk about what the problem that the ordinance seeks to address is, and then what the ordinance does, and then lay out some options for the council. So in 2019, an organization identified as Mothers Demand Action requested that the council consider adopting an ordinance that requires gun owners to safely store their guns. Council directed staff to study the issue and return for council direction. In July 20th, staff did report back to the council and indicate that the city has the legal ability to enact the proposed ordinance, and council directed staff to prepare the ordinance and bring it back for council approval. The problem the ordinance seeks to address is the problem with loss of life and injuries sustained by guns accessible to children. The organization advocates for the adoption of an ordinance that would require the safe storage of guns when they're not being used. State law requires that locks be provided to gun purchasers, but it does not actually require that the locks be used. So it's closing that gap. The draft ordinance presented to the council would require guns to be stored safely, and safe storage is defined in the ordinance as making sure that the gun is unloaded and either in a locked container or unloaded and affixed with a locking device. Violations of the ordinance would be enforced as any other violation in the municipal code through the variety of remedies provided for in the code. Council's options are to do nothing. There's no legal obligation to adopt the ordinance, to introduce the ordinance as presented, or to introduce the ordinance with any modifications the council deems appropriate. This is for introduction, so if the council does introduce an ordinance tonight, we'll bring it back for adoption at the next council meeting. That concludes my presentation.
Nice. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
Seeing no questions, I'll go to public comment. Austin Traver, 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Austin Traver. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Hi, like I said, I'm Austin, and I am looking for my speech. Sorry about that. Wrote this down. Thank you. Mayor and council members, thank you for introducing a safe storage ordinance. This is something I'm in strong support of. Growing up in this county, I know more than one teen who's committed suicide, and I know that mandating all firearms kept securely stored, this I think would go a long way in preventing these kinds of tragic events in the future. Suicide's almost always an impulsive act, and I've known people who have succumbed to that impulsive act. And I think the trouble with firearms is that it makes that act almost certainly final, and it makes it certainly a lot easier. And I think when things are easy, we tend to succumb to our impulses and temptations, and I don't think that this should be one. Thank you for considering this ordinance.
Thank you so much, Austin. Now I'll go to Nancy G. 2 minutes.
Hi.
Hi, Nancy.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So I'm Nancy Gogan. I'm a member of Moms Demand Action, Every Town for Action, and I'm also a former member of the Human Resource Commission of San Mateo County, the city of San Mateo, 1990s. And thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. I'm asking that you please pass this safe gun storage ordinance. This is a common sense measure that can help save lives by requiring safe gun storage. Unfortunately, the tragedy of death and injury from guns not being properly stored is something that happens in communities across this country. This issue will continue to be a reality, no less so now in these times of shelter in place when more time is spent at home. This ordinance can reduce the possibility of such tragedies in our community. Thank you very much.
Nancy, thank you for your advocacy and for your service to the city of San Mateo. Terry Whitehair.
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this issue. And I just want to commendate the council for when this was first presented to the council, sending it directly to study session. It's a very important measure. It will definitely prevent gun violence, especially as the last speaker spoke in terms of the stay at home order. When family members are all together, and to have guns safely stored so no one who can get to them that doesn't need them and doesn't have them will prevent gun violence. And I commend you for your leadership on this issue, and I recommend that you support it and vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. John Selling.
Hi, my name is John Selling. I am a local physician. I would like my full support for San Mateo's adoption of a safe storage ordinance. We must have a law that specifies what it means to safely store a firearm. Safe storage is not simply hiding a firearm up high in a closet. It must be securely locked. 70% of children know where firearms are hidden in the home, and studies show a shocking number have actually handled these firearms when no one's around. We need this ordinance to keep all children safe before the tragedy happens. A safe storage ordinance is a very simple measure that does not prevent easy access to a firearm for self-defense, but has been shown to save actual lives. If only one child is saved due to this ordinance, it will have been well worth it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Selling. Kelly Traver.
Hi, my name is Kelly Traver. I'm also a physician and I'm a Moms Demand Action volunteer. I speak on behalf of the 502 Moms Demand Action volunteers in San Mateo in strong support of the Safe Storage Ordinance. Currently, passing this ordinance is more urgent than ever. Typically in this country, one small child dies every day from unintentionally killing him or herself after finding an unsecured firearm, and 2 teens die of suicide every day using an unsecured firearm. And unfortunately, these deaths have spiked since COVID. Firearm sales have doubled in COVID, 40% to new and often inexperienced users, and child unintentional deaths by firearms have sharply increased in this time by almost 50%. And that's just over the past few months. So your work on this ordinance is greatly appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Traver. Valerie Zhu.
Hi, my name is Valerie. I'm a firm supporter of the Safe Storage Ordinance, so thank you for drafting one for San Mateo. Studies show that 85% of school shootings are done by current or former students who do the mass shooting using an unsecured firearm they obtain from their home, a relative's home, or a friend's home. It would be devastating if a mass shooting took place in one of our San Mateo schools, so I thank you for considering this ordinance to prevent such a thing from happening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valerie. Brad Silver.
Yes, I'm a retired physician, Moms Demand Action volunteer. I definitely support this ordinance. 4 million children in the United States live in homes with unsecured firearms, and that is just horrendous. So I certainly support this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Silver. Dads demand action too. Margaret O'Connell.
Hi, I'm Margaret O'Connell. I'm also a Moms Demand Action volunteer, and I did want to thank you guys for leading on this and just say that I do strongly support the ordinance. And, you know, I can't say much else upon what everyone else has said, but we do know that these safe storage laws save lives, and minors in homes with unsecured guns are at an especially high risk of an accident or an accidental suicide or a suicide. So with everyone at home due to COVID, this issue just seems especially urgent now. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I am going to close the public comment period, bring it back to the council, and I just want to say, so often when we bring up this topic, we talk about statistics, and the statistics are awful, but statistics don't paint a picture of real people. And it only takes one person who you're close to, one person in your life who you wish you could get back, who is never coming back because of a gun that they found and a choice that they made. And if we can save just one life, it's worth doing something.
Is that a motion?
I move approval. Yes, I do.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Can I add a comment?
Yes, Rick.
I just want to say that this is something that's I've had friends who've been killed, and one who even killed his girlfriend and then killed himself. Way too close to my personal being. I want to say thank you to Austin Traver for making the statement that guns make suicide and killing too easy. I've been saying that for about 40 years because it's very true. I once remember seeing a report where the suspect was asked, why did you kill the whole family? Well, he was committing a burglary. He encountered a family. He said, well, they were all home. And he had a gun. Okay. He was counting witnesses, thinking about court. They were all home. So I totally support this. We can't do it soon enough. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I agree. We can't do this soon enough. I feel like we've been on borrowed time, especially during shelter in place, knowing that gun sales have spiked, that we're all in some sort of level of mental health crisis during shelter in place, and this prolonged financial crisis and health crisis. If there was a way to do this tonight, I would say let's do it tonight. I feel like I understand that the community has been patient, and we have to we have gone through a process and needed to come through study session first. And it has taken many months to come back to us from that first meeting in December. And if there is a way to pass this tonight, even by emergency ordinance, I would strongly support doing that.
Okay. If there's no other comment, I think we have a motion and a second. And I would ask the clerk to call roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Goethals.
Yes.
Councilmember Pappen.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Bonilla.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes.
5-0.
Thank you so much. And thank you again, Sean, for the presentation. And for all of our speakers. Moving on to our next item, item 21, our community public art.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Heather Stewart. I'm Senior Management Analyst with the Community Development Department. I'm also staff to the Civic Arts Committee and manage the Art in Public Places program. Bringing it up. And so with this, I just want to first review There we go. This slide just is overviewing the council's presentation or discussion previously on July 20th, and upon the resolution affirming the city's commitment to the racial equality on July 20th. Council discussed a request for a mural or other art project that would promote racial equity, and the council identified the Civic Arts Committee to help facilitate that project. So with that direction, staff did do some research and is providing some of that information to you tonight. Before I move into, I just want to touch base with what the Art in Public Places program is. It was established by ordinance in 2005, and it requires developers to either install the art directly or pay an in lieu fee if they wish not to install the art. They're obligated if the city's permits are $3 million or more. These are not tax dollars. These are fees paid by the developers. And those fees are available to the city for acquisition, installation, maintenance, and of public art and the related program expenses. The Civic Arts Committee is responsible for implementing the program, and these committee members were appointed to represent a breadth of expertise from artists, nonprofit, San Mateo businesses, architectural experts, and the city's planning commission. And just to identify how much money is in the fund, we have approximately $202,000 in the bank right now. We have about $20,000 that is reserved for future maintenance of public art, and that leaves a finite amount of about $182,000 available for this project or other projects. There is no new revenue anticipated over the next 2 years because developers are wanting to put in their own art. So in the earlier years, there was a decision in collaboration with Parks and Rec Commission that it would be more effective and efficient if Parks and Rec identified priority locations within their parks and publicly owned buildings throughout the city. So with those selected locations, none of them really have identified as viable for local murals. Most of them have no structures. So those are the previously identified parks. So let's talk a bit about the mural and maybe at least looking at one alternative with some considerations thereof. So just to revisit the mural interests that were identified at that previous meeting is that the request for a highly public access to the location with maximized visibility. We want to make sure we include the community in the input, as well as making it a long-lasting conversation and a message through the city. And it can be on either public or private property. So understanding those interests, and there's a great interest for one large mural. Some research with some city experience and additional research has identified some benefits with some additional considerations. So for any project, first, especially one of this large community mural, it's important to decide early on the extent and the breadth in which community involvement can participate in this, and then develop the process that meets those basic interests and inclusion. I have yet been able to identify any city-owned property that has room for a mural that states that accepts those stated interests, particularly with the maximum visibility and the public access interests. There are a couple of places in the city that have overpasses that may be thought of as some perfect locations. However, with research and conversation with public art administrators throughout the state, they have identified these projects as very long to get completed and extremely cumbersome in the bureaucracy and work to get it done. And so there's a lot of commitments between the city and the owning organization of that resource. So this really isn't a recommended option for this project. Using private property, of course, also may involve greater legal obligations between the city and the property owner. And a key thing is planning for the lifetime of the piece. Making it a long-lasting mural, you need to really consider and plan for the length of the life of the mural. So exposure, structural issues that come up, possible vandalism, and even the method of use for preserving the mural in the first place are just a few of the impacts that we should study or consider and plan for, and even potentially for the future removal or replacement of that mural. So now looking at some private property considerations, there are many that are very visible and have good public access for sure throughout the city. Working together with those property owners would certainly help foster a sense of community with the owner and the public. There are some other considerations that the challenge and possible challenge of finding a willing owner with the desired location and a suitable space to host the mural for whatever the defined lifetime is, and willing to enter into the legal agreement that will be necessary. It's also important to confirm that the desired location have structural integrity, as well as a surface that has very little need for the expensive and substantial preparation of the space to host that mural for a long period of time. The other thing is to consider for private property is that hosting that mural may put some limitations upon the building owner if there's need for any kind of maintenance or restoration or repairs that may need to happen that could impact the mural that is there. So with those considerations, just one alternative to be creative that is available and that might be an option for the city to consider is the idea of a smaller number, but throughout the city in highly visible city-owned utility boxes. It's not a new idea to put utility box art, but we don't have an existing program for doing that at this time. There are many boxes throughout the city that are in highly visible locations, but they also provide the city direct control of those spaces. The murals could be painted or designed and printed on vinyl wrap, which is done in multiple places throughout the state. The installation is easier to repair and replace as necessary. The boxes would likely be very low cost in comparison to a mural per installation, and the full cost of however many are likely to be well within the funds that are currently available. Another way is it could offer funding opportunities through the community support that could better leverage the funds available. And it really gives the opportunity for potential greater level of engagement and expression differences. So just take a quick look at the general process that may happen. As I referenced, knowing what we want to do with community involvement certainly impacts this decision. But as the report has an attachment, the Civic Arts Committee already has guidelines for the art in public places. So this document identifies those criteria for the evaluation and the approval of both developer in-placed art or public art. So this is what it may look like. It's important through this process to really allow for multiple engagement opportunities. We really are interested in making it transparent and inclusive of the community. So we would first want to identify community stakeholders and work with them who would work with the Civic Arts Committee. Identify and secure as necessary the preferred location or locations. Identify the interest in the type of art. A mural has been the primary conversation. Maybe there's something different, but also the theme of which this art is developed. Then we'd want to invite proposals for that art that meets the design parameters. Those responses would be reviewed and identified with some top artist candidates, and the process for doing that can come through later through the committee's work. The selection of the artists and the recommendation to the council for approval. Then the implementation of the installation process and the celebration, as we know is important, celebrating the art. And then we certainly would immediately start implementing the plan for maintenance, repair, and or rotation if that is decided to be part of the decision. So based on that information, there are some guidance questions we have to help direct the Civic Arts Committee. Does the council have a preference for a large single mural or a utility box alternative, or what? Is there consensus with the general process I just outlined? Would there be a preference, a preferred process in which the community stakeholders would be identified to work with the CAC? Does the council have any additional ideas for ways to involve the community? How would the council wish the project to be funded? Would it be fully funded through the Art in Public Places program? Would it be fully community funded? Or would there be a shared leveraging of funds with the community and the program funds? So those are some of the questions that are to you to help guide future action on this program. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take your comments.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks for a great presentation, and thank you for starting the conversation. I think this is just a beginning, and Deputy Mayor Rodriguez wants to start us off. Go, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess a question I have with the multiple utility box murals. I grew up in Belmont where they had all the fire hydrants kind of decked out in bicentennial colors. And I always used to love walking by them and seeing the differences in each one. And I was just curious for the utility box proposal, how many utility boxes do we have? Like, is there any, I know that you're just throwing out ideas, so it's not fully fleshed out, but what would that look like in general?
I have already previously started researching a utility box program. So I happen to know, and IT helped, both Public Works provided a list. We have over 300 throughout the city, and there is a map that IT helped identify. So it would help us select which ones that we think are in the most visible places that we would wish to utilize. So, you know, I'm thinking maybe a round number of 10. So, 10 locations, that's not a limit. It's just an idea of about how many, and looking at the the funding, they're probably between 3-ish thousand per installation, particularly if we go with the wrap. So
okay. And I know, again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot because it's not a fleshed out idea, but were you thinking that it would be kind of like the Toyonaka ones in their downtown where they'd all kind of like have a different theme by an individual artist, or would they be kind of all done by the same style and theme? Or is
that's part of what the questions are asking. And I think, there was a strong interest for the community to be engaged, be it identified stakeholders or however and that also is part of the questions. But I think that plan is to develop what they want. Do they want it to be the same, or do you want to look at different visions of the same theme at each one, offering a different opportunity to envision what that means?
Got it. Thank you. And are you sitting behind me? I didn't see you.
Yeah, I'm chilling out in the reading section.
Thank you, Heather.
Certainly.
Other questions or public comment? Let's go to public comment. Nancy G.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, sorry. So it's Nancy again from Human Resource Commission veteran. So this is kind of a crazy idea. Bear with me. I'm wondering if you might consider alternative to murals, or in addition to having a permanent type structure, for example, at Central Park, that could highlight the city's rich African American heritage. I'm thinking I've been inspired by what they have in Washington, D.C. on the Mall, and Atlanta. And I know this is that would be a big project, but I kind of feel like this is the time to maybe think big. I'm thinking maybe like a cultural kiosk, like I've seen in Sedona, where they highlight their history, the members of their history, or what, people they want to highlight. Also, Peninsula Open Space Trust. I don't know if any of you have seen on their trails. They'll give you information about the trails and the nature and the history of what they did, what the organization did. So I'm thinking like maybe a kiosk, or also something that possibly has a room or two that volunteers could be docents, and possibly could include other cultural heritage areas of San Mateo, for example, Native American culture, Asian and Latin American. I was in Central Park today, just briefly, and I did see a spot. I was kind of thinking, well, would it even be possible? Because I think Central Park would be so nice, it's central, to have something like this. And I saw a spot that's just south and west of the main lawn where there's no big trees. It's near the big trees, but there's a big spot where there's no trees. And right now there's one art installation there. It's smaller, and it's called Hear Me. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's regarding disabled populations. So my crazy idea is that possibly that could be relocated, and that spot could accommodate like a kiosk or a small building or structure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Seeing no other public comment, I will close the public comment period, bring it back to the council. I don't have any fully fledged, fully thought out ideas. I'm really open. I think one of the things that came out of our last conversation was that we wanted this to be generated by members of our residents, by the public, for them to come with their ideas and flesh them out. I think that rather than dictate form or content, I think that providing a process where people make proposals is maybe the direction to go in. I'm not comfortable just directing what it should look like or what it should say. So I'm not ready yet. Is anybody else ready? Rick, do you have something?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a little bit. I totally agree with the idea that public needs to be involved. And then I've had some other thoughts about locations. One is, every year we have the MLK Day celebration at the train station. I think the train station could be an excellent location, provided we're able to find a suitable space, but that depends on the art, right? And the other thing is, right across the street from the train station on 2nd Avenue, the police department has a substation there. And there is some wall space above the window at the PD substation. The higher the better in terms of vandalism, right? Or the wrap concept could be used maybe on the inside of their window, right? So there it is right there. And the police keep their blinds closed anyway, so it's not like they're looking at anything through the window. So just a couple locations, but I really look forward to having a public process. And I think consideration for the ability to protect it. And I'm afraid of that with the suggestion about the utility boxes. They're right there where anybody in the world can get to them really quickly and easily. And at $3,000 a pop to rewrap them, I think we could go through a lot of money after we have to pay an artist for a design or designs first. So,
Deputy Mayor Rodriguez.
I guess I think Councilmember Bonilla brought up a lot of good points, and same thing with you, Mr. Mayor. A question I have to Heather is that it looked like you were coming for us for some guidance, and I don't think any council member up here wants to try to dictate exactly what it's going to look like or anything like that. But I know you have already met with the Civic Arts Committee, and so what information could we provide you that would be helpful, not stifling or cutting off different routes we could possibly go, but also not have to just kick it down the road and then you have to ask these questions of us exactly again. So is there kind of like a middle road direction we can give you that would be more helpful than just saying let the public decide?
If I may, the understanding of public being involved is very, very obvious and assumed throughout the development of the information. One of the key elements to this, and this is no disparagement against the Civic Arts Committee, is that they have not managed a large public project yet. They're usually focused on, they're focused on the projects through development. So I think giving them some direction on how you envision, for example, I believe Councilmember Lee at the previous meeting mentioned the committee that helped develop the resolution. And would you prefer that? There's a level of trying to help define what the public process, how do we get the people instead of the entire community of the community all sharing their ideas, how best to do that. So direction on how best to do that. I anticipate Councilmember Lee having some thoughts about that. But also the funding, we haven't met as a committee. We're meeting next week, as a matter of fact, and I have asked them to keep an eye on this conversation so that they know what's also coming in the future. But funding is a big issue with that. We have a finite amount of money, and not expecting to get any more for at least a couple of years. So trying to find something that doesn't use all of it. Because I know the committee has the interest in preserving some for potential other art. So to use all of what's available is not an interest they have. So just looking at how would you envision that funding, that finite funding being available? So those are two key things. Can you give us the community member direction and what your thoughts about funding?
Councilmember Lee.
Well, can I finish?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Did you, Eric, go ahead.
Okay. So I appreciate those clarifications because I did have some notes on some of the questions that you asked. One of the things I share Councilmember Bonilla's concerns about vandalism. I mean, we're seeing it on a lot of our murals that all over our downtown. So I know that I think that at least for me, that has to be one of the top concerns, because it doesn't matter how beautiful it is one day if the next weekend it's all tagged. But that being said, I personally find it very compelling to have small, like the idea of different works of art in different places, whether it's utility boxes or what. And the reason I believe that is because if it's just in one location, unless it's just like the perfect central location, I don't think the whole city is going to be experiencing it as much as they could. But and it's also too, it's hard to get everybody involved. But if it's in these different locations, you can really. I think it's going to be easier to rally community input, and not just it's going to be in downtown, or it's just going to be in North Central, or it's just going to be wherever it is. That's just my 2 cents on that. And then in terms of funding, I'm wondering if like matching funds and where the city would put a certain amount, maybe X percentage, and then we go out for donations within the community or within the business community, and perhaps they get their name in really small print somewhere on the mural or wherever it is. But if that is a model that we could do, so we don't deplete all our funds for just this, especially if it's just one big project somewhere. I think that I don't know if the community would be best served if we spent all that money just on that thing. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Councilmember Lee, do you want to jump in?
Yes. Well, I'll just dovetail and underscore a lot of what Deputy Mayor Rodriguez said and was said before. In terms of the concern about vandalism and it being a more protected location, I agree. I think that the idea of engaging multiple artists and having some variety and in location, but also in style, would accomplish I think the kind of expressionism that we're trying to cultivate, and like literally the diversity that will be manifested in this process. And so I think that makes a lot of sense as a process. I have some ideas in terms of the structuring the community partnership aspect, and I think that looking at some of our own ethnic history and some of the institutional leadership that already exists here as strengths. I'm thinking about the Italian American Club. I'm thinking about the Japanese American Community Center, and the existing relationship we have with the Guatemalan consulate and the NAACP and San Mateo chapter. I mean, those organizations, and I'm sure we could build on that list, would be really incredible partners to do, to put out, to support the selection, I think, of a piece that and having them partner with the committee for a specific art piece that is meant to talk about Italian American history and culture, for example, and having them be participants in the selection process is how I could see that partnership taking place. And so I would my fallback would be, let's look at where we have institutional anchors that are holding the cultural, the cultural support systems in the city, and engage through those entities. And then I completely agree with the sentiment of this being a public-private partnership and the fundraising opportunity there. I don't think that the intent was ever to deplete the full fund of our entire art program with this one idea, and so I definitely would like to be judicious and in determining how much we contribute, and certainly go out to our partners in the community, our cultural partners, and then also nonprofits and our corporate partners to do partnership fundraising. So that's kind of how I saw this going. Does that help, Heather?
Can I throw something out and maybe get some feedback from my fellow council members? So we have a commission. We have a Civic Arts Commission and
committee,
excuse me. even if it was just a simple RFP, as simple as please give us your proposals for a project that celebrates racial equity. I'd love to give our local artist community a month or two to think about what they would put in for a project like that, and invite the community partners that Councilmember Lee mentioned to come in and be a part of the selection process and give their opinion as to which projects are rising to the top, the ones that will best celebrate our community. And I agree that we're not looking to completely deplete the amount of money that we have in our Civic Arts Committee kitty there. I think we can raise more funds from our public partners. So is that process, is a simple RFP with that process, if we invite the right people to come be a part of it and weigh in, is that simple enough? Would you give it further direction on what we're looking for?
I believe it would be a bit big to chew because you really, to ask for, give us your art. As we know, everybody has different opinion about the same piece of art. And so, yes, there might be a diversity of ideas, but we really need to make it a viable opportunity, is to really look at a thematic, give some directions about what an RFP, whenever you release any RFP, you give some directions as to what you're looking for. So I think it's important to do the same before we do that. And per the process, certainly once that structure of what we're looking for, it could be somewhat vague, but a theme could be, or, concepts, it really has to be embedded in that call for proposals in whatever three-dimensional, utility boxes, single mural, all of those things could be viable, but we need to put some parameters around it than just say, give us your art ideas, because that would be a little too much.
But also, I think one of the big parameters to define is where, right? And the form. So are you looking for direction from us to help determine those two things?
Yes, if you have a preference. We can continue. I think the biggest question is public or private space, because utilizing privately owned buildings to paint creates some additional bureaucracy and legal parameters rather than having something that the city controls directly. And I think that's one of the benefits of the utility box things, is the city has total control. So it would be great to say, yeah, we really, and I'm hearing we really like the idea of multiple opportunities of expression that could also support the diversity. And I think that is what we have available to us. Not to say that we can't go into a partnership, but we would be more legally bound to work with them and have certain parameters about the life, the maintenance, and all that kind of stuff that we wouldn't have on a city property.
Are we overestimating the concerns of vandalism on the utility boxes and the cost associated?
Yes, I haven't done a full-on current research, waiting to find out kind of the direction as far as what the current is. There are many places that do the vinyl wraps, the buses, the transportation do vinyl wraps, and they have stood up very well to vandalism. And the other cool thing about it is, if it gets too vandalized, we can just print it and reapply it. So, I don't think the full amount I quoted, and that is certainly not a confirmed dollar. It was just kind of an average of a fully funded wrap program. But I think that's where we do look at vandalism. It's important, but I think the wraps may actually give us better protection. Whereas a lot of large murals and paint, they'll put special materials on the paint to help protect it as well. But then you're looking at a paint job that needs to be refurbished rather than more easily replace the whole if chosen to do so. Did that answer your question?
Diane, you have comments?
I do. So my thinking is, I like the idea of more than one location. I like the idea of the theme of racial equity. I think it's good to kind of be reminded in different locations about that concept and how that concept exists in different ways. So that's kind of where I'm leaning. If you're looking for a little more specific direction, that's where I'm going. So the utility boxes has a great deal of appeal to me because I like the idea that it can be everywhere and it can have a general theme of racial equity. And however that is materializes through community input is, I think, a great opportunity to really expand on that concept. And it is a concept that needs a lot of attention and TLC right now. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I like that you've got a dollar figure for it too. I mean, more or less. I won't hold you to it, but it seems manageable dollars wise too. So those 3 reasons why I am leaning in that direction.
Councilmember Bonilla.
Thank you. I want to say that I think that I know the Civic Arts Committee has not had a public process like this, but it's been done. I remember the Central Park Master Plan charrettes. I remember, many times when CDD has put things together. So it's not something we can't do. We need to find diversity in comments, input on this. If a majority of council members, or if the process as we go through it were to come down to the utility boxes, certainly I could live with that. But it seems to me like the message then, whatever we decide the actual art is, needs to be consistent at each and every one, because different ones would provide who knows what kind of opportunities for people to say we're not recognizing everybody somehow. So I think that there are some other opportunities, places like somewhere in Central Park might be a great place to think about. Also, I'm looking at some of the new buildings we have coming up, because I heard mention of private-public partnership. So maybe it could be public and nonprofit partnership in like someplace on the side of maybe the track-facing side of the new affordable housing at the old Kinko site, where there is, a soundproofing extra there, and I think a lot of stucco. So that might be a good spot that's visible for a lot of people passing down 4th Avenue. So I think that kind of thinking is what I'm looking at. But I'm very happy we're looking at this. Thank you very much.
Or the track-facing side of the parking garage structure.
Sure. Yeah.
That was my second choice, by the way.
Okay.
I was thinking something along the rail line, because as people pass through our city, it will say something about our city as well. So I was thinking that as well, but
you second that.
And that was if I may, I'm sorry.
Yes, of course, Heather.
That was something I considered, did a lot of like street view. One of the things about the parking structure, the existing parking structure, is it's right smack on the track surface. Plus, it already is pre-designed to mirror the cinema, etc. And there's very tiny little spot available. And so getting approval to put a scaffolding where the train goes sounds problematic, to get that kind of authority to be able to paint something on that wall. it didn't sound like it was viable.
Heather, are you talking about the new parking garage behind Talbot's?
No, I was going to get to that one next, but somebody did mention the downtown, the train station, or First Avenue. So I was touching on that. And then just as a reminder, Mid-Penn Housing has actually already come to the Civic Arts Committee with their art concepts. So they are already moving forward with their art concepts, and that building won't be here for at least a couple years. So it's not going to be fast or responsive to this interest.
Sorry, just one thought real quick. There are spaces along the parking structure in the alley, like across from Phil's, and so I know that there's a nice like Art Deco theme, but there are stretches that would sort of above the entryways that could be used that wouldn't be easy, like they're high enough that they wouldn't be tagged. They're low enough that they're on a pedestrian street, very protected, I would think. I don't know if we thought about that idea.
I have not that particular location. You're talking about the entrances into the garage, above the entrances to the garage. I have not looked at that particular location, but I can look and see if it's viable.
Eric,
the other thing, I'm sorry. The other thing that is a strong interest is high access, high visibility, and is that really where is that meet that interest? So that's for the committee, the selection committee to work through.
Eric.
Yeah, this comment was a while back, but just I think that if we do go with one location, being in a central high trafficked area, I think would be the best way to go, just to make sure that it's just getting the exposure if we're going to invest all this time on it. And then the other question, the other idea, I know that Mid-Penn has their own, they're moving forward with their own public art, but I wonder if there's a possibility of like some sort of three-dimensional art piece in the plaza that they were proposing, or just where other elements on that property, since we have so much influence over it, that's maybe not necessarily a mural, but maybe more of a three-dimensional type piece might be interesting as well. Just want to throw that out there.
Okay.
I'd like to add,
yes, Rick.
on the parking garage that would go with the Mid-Penn project, on the track side, there is a 15-foot easement where there will be no building. Okay, that the train owns, right? But there will be no building. There is actually room for scaffold and work there. Okay, so we shouldn't throw that off the list. And I see spots, I'm looking at the elevation right now. There are spots there where a good mural could fit there.
You're talking the I'm sorry, you mentioned, is it the Mid-Peninsula garage you're talking about?
Fifth Avenue. I'm looking at the elevation, and I know there's a 15-foot easement there that will not be built on because it belongs to the Joint Powers Authority, the JPB. So I think that's something we shouldn't check off the list yet.
Is the council open to taking all of the ideas we just came up with and aggregating them into an RFP and having that be submitted to the Civic Arts Committee? Is that enough narrowing, do you think? Or we should keep talking?
I would like to ask that your feedback go to the committee, to the Civic Arts Committee, have some of the same conversation. Also, with regards to inviting the community members, I can touch base with you, Councilmember Lee, with some of those recommendations with regards to getting potentially a subcommittee to, of key stakeholders to work with the Civic Arts Committee to further flesh that out with consideration to your feedback. And so I think that would be easier to marry those two processes together.
Rick, were you waving goodbye?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just about to pull out my team. No, I'm thinking, would it be possible to have a joint meeting of the Civic Arts Committee and the City Council to throw ideas back and forth and come up with something that could be a work plan to them?
It's, if you wish to have that, we can work towards that. I'd be happy to present that to them and ask if that's something they can jump in on. We certainly
let us know if they're open to it, you know.
Certainly, you know, if they want to come meet with you guys and have that conversation, we can do that. Be happy to arrange that for you if that's the decision.
It sounds like something the next mayor is going to have to deal with.
You can never have too many opinions when it comes to art. That's what I find.
That's the challenge.
No.
One of the challenges.
Okay, next step, everybody. Next step.
So my thinking is that if we did do a joint meeting, it could be a public meeting, should be a public meeting. I think it would really broaden the input and give us better direction. So that's all.
How about if the next step is, I think we all have to really think hard on this, but maybe the next step is the joint meeting with the Civic Arts Committee. And during that meeting, we decide, okay, we've got to come up with what goes into the RFP and finalize it. I know I'm kicking the can a little bit, but I think we made progress.
Well, I believe the Civic Arts Committee could come up with a draft for your approval, even, and certainly engaging the public with the feedback. As I mentioned, all those meetings are public meetings, and we certainly would invite, not to dissuade from a shared meeting, but I think they certainly also have opinions about art and process, and so it would be great to get their feedback on your feedback. As a first next step, I would like to take this to the committee for some conversation about it and be able to move forward with that, not necessarily coming up with the RFP directly, but at least creating a process and a structure to move forward with this as soon as possible.
Great. Consensus? Head nods? Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Committee's going to work on this and bring it back to us. Appreciate it. Appreciate it very much. Thank you, Heather. With that, I'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is item number 22.
Good evening, City Council.
There you are, Jennifer.
So I am Jennifer Chen, the city's economic development manager. The item before you tonight is an emergency ordinance for a moratorium on the enforcement of zoning requirements for outdoor business operations. And let me share my screen with you. Give me 1 second. Yeah, my screen is not cooperating. And it's definitely not cooperating. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Great. So at the last City Council meeting on August 17th, the City Council approved an emergency ordinance to impose a moratorium on the enforcement of minimum parking standards for gyms, fitness centers, personal care services, hair salons, barbershops, places of worship, and shopping centers. Additionally, you also extended the previously adopted moratorium for restaurants to operate outdoors as a response to the state of California's prohibiting these uses indoors in order to slow transmission of COVID-19. Staff realized later that the zoning requirements also needed to be suspended in order for businesses to operate outside. Therefore, we're coming back to asking City Council to adopt an emergency ordinance to impose a moratorium on the enforcement of zoning regulations in order for business to move outside of an enclosed building. This ordinance is temporary and will would work in conjunction with both the minimum parking requirements to allow for outdoor operations. As of August 31st, hair salons, barbershops, shopping centers are allowed indoors, but they are included in this emergency ordinance to provide flexibility in case of future changes. The emergency ordinance will be effective for 90 days and expires on December 7th of this year.
Questions from the council? Public comment. Any public comment? Seeing no public comment, I will close the public comment period, bring it back to the council for any questions or comments or.
I make a motion.
A second.
Motion is second. Madam Clerk, would you please call roll?
Councilmember Pappen.
Yes.
Councilmember Bonilla.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Gosels.
Yes, and I think that our unanimity reflects Jennifer's excellent presentation.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much. That concludes item number 22. Moving on to item number 23. Sean, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Is it still today?
It is. Last time I checked.
Feels like yesterday to me.
Share. Right. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So I'll be making a presentation regarding a residential eviction moratorium. Here's a quick overview of the presentation. Again, the purpose was to provide the opportunity for the council to enact a moratorium on residential evictions if it deems its actions necessary. I'll provide background on how we got to where we are today, some actions taken by other governmental agencies that relate to this issue since our last meeting, and then options for the council. So in March, at the beginning of the statewide shutdown in response to the pandemic, the council considered whether to enact a moratorium on residential and small business tenant evictions. The council adopted a moratorium on small business evictions, which it has extended a few times since then, but did not adopt a moratorium on residential evictions. The county had already adopted a moratorium on residential evictions that applied to tenants within the city, and so the council did not see the need to do so. In August, the Board of Supervisors decided that it would not extend its moratorium on residential evictions, and at your last meeting, the council discussed whether to enact a moratorium. The council was aware that there were many efforts being considered by other agencies, and the council directed staff to prepare an ordinance that could be adopted at tonight's meeting if it was deemed necessary. Since then, there have been actions by a number of agencies, including the San Mateo County Superior Court, the California Legislature, and the Center for Disease Control. With respect to the court, on August 26th, the presiding judge of the Superior Court issued an order suspending eviction proceedings between August 28th and October 2nd. During that time, no defaults on cases that have been filed will be entered. No writs of possession, which is what you get if you are successful as a landlord in an eviction proceeding, will be issued. No summons will be issued, so an eviction action can't be started during this time period. And all cases that were set for trial are taken off calendar, and there shall be no trials on eviction matters sooner than October 12th. And this action applies to all eviction proceedings, meaning residential and commercial. On August 31st, the California Legislature adopted AB 3088. It only applies to residential tenancy, so it does not apply to the small business moratorium the council has enacted. Under this statute, tenants may not be evicted for failing to pay rent during the period of March to August. If the tenant provides a written declaration of hardship. for the period that follows from September 1st through January 31st, 2021, there is also an eviction in place for tenants experiencing hardship as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic if they pay at least 25% of the rent due. So there's a requirement to pay some portion of the rent in order to get the eviction protection during that time period. There are special rules for tenants who make more than $100,000 and more than 130% of area median income. Tenants in that category have to provide additional documentation as to why they can't pay their rent. And in all cases, the unpaid rent must be paid, but the failure to pay may not be used as the cause for the eviction. What this means is that the landlord can sue to recover unpaid rent, but they can't evict the tenant for not paying rent. Yes.
Could you go back to the last one, the 100,000 or 130% AMI? Is it the lesser or the greater? I assume it's the greater.
Yeah, I believe it's the greater. Yeah.
So for us, it would be 130% AMI.
Right.
Okay.
And so the ability to sue, landlords are not able to sue to recover unpaid rent until March 1st of 2021. That's basically how that statute works. The statute does provide that it is a matter of statewide concern. It applies to charter cities, and so it has some preemptive effect if the council was to approve an eviction moratorium. If the city was to adopt an eviction moratorium for residential tenants, it would not go into effect until February 1st, 2021. If the city adopts an ordinance that provides for a period of time, a deferral, a repayment period for unpaid rent, that repayment must start on March 1st of 2021. So the city couldn't provide a longer deferral than starting on March 1st, 2021. And if the council adopts an ordinance that provides for a repayment period for unpaid rent, full payment of any unpaid rent must be made by, it's actually March 31st of 2021. And then on September 1st, the CDC issued an order imposing a moratorium through the end of on evictions through the end of 2020. To qualify for the protection, the tenant must certify that they earn no more than $99,000. They can't make the rent because of COVID-19. That they will make payments that they can afford, so they can afford 20% in that they have to make that payment, and that they understand that they must pay the unpaid rent when the moratorium ends. The order does indicate that it does not apply in states that provide broader protection to tenants, so it doesn't apply in California. The California statute applies. So the options for the council are to do nothing. If the council does nothing at this point, then the provisions of AB 3088 that I just talked about apply to eviction actions in San Mateo. Or the council could enact a local moratorium. Again, under AB 3088, whatever ordinance that's enacted would not go into effect until February of 2021. And the repayment provisions must comply with the statute in terms of when it starts and ends. If the council is interested in enacting a moratorium on residential evictions, I would recommend that we not adopt the ordinance that's in your packet this evening. It was drafted before AB 3088 was adopted, and so I'd want to revise the ordinance that's in the packet to address the provisions of AB 3088 before the council adopts it. That concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Sean. Questions from the council? Seeing none, I'll go to public comment. Public comment is there any public comment on this item? Seeing no public comment, I'll close the public comment period, bring it back to the council. Any strong opinions? Anybody want to see how 3088 plays out a little bit?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, I don't think there's any further direction for the city attorney. No need for a motion. We can close this item and move on to reports and announcements. Reports and announcements. I have one, unless somebody wants to jump in. It's come to my attention, and I've noticed around town that there's a campaign heating up about Measure R and Measure Y, and lots of public statements going on regarding affordable housing and inclusionary housing and things like that. And it seems to me we're not doing enough to educate the public on what the actual requirements are. Sean, do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
I have heard concerns about information relating to the effect of the measures with respect to the affordable housing programs.
And I feel, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we have an obligation to educate the public on the actual terms of the measures and the ways that they apply, and so what the consequences of the election could be. We have a website dedicated to educating the public on these things. I really think that we need to spell out in clearer terms. I'll just give you an example. I believe it's the proponents of Measure R. Excuse me. I believe it's the proponents of Measure Y who suggest, who are making allegations about Measure R, that affordable housing wouldn't get built, for example. And I feel like that's misleading when it comes to other provisions, other regulations that have been passed by this council and requirements that we've set out for affordable housing being built. I think at one point we were really requiring a higher standard, and we did the whole study to possibly increase the inclusionary housing ordinance to 20%. If Measure Y got passed, if Measure Y doesn't pass, does it suggest that affordable housing will suddenly stop being built? My answer to that would be no.
If neither measure is passed, the city's policies and the general plan with respect to inclusionary housing remain. And it would be up to the council to decide at that point whether to change those policies, make them more robust, or eliminate them. And then the council would have that discretion and authority to do that if the measure didn't pass. But it wouldn't change.
I completely understand the way that you're saying that. But right now we require more than Measure P does. And so if all things being equal, we will continue to require affordable housing moving forward, regardless of what happens, irrespective of what happens to the two measures in the fall. Okay. I just want to make sure that we're putting that out to the public so that people are making an educated decision on however they want to vote in November. Anything else for the good of the order? Councilmember Pappen.
Well, I just want to congratulate you, Mayor. That was a heck of a program this morning on the health fair, and I as many things as I go to, I found it very informative. So I really thank you for the effort that you put into it, and I think it was a real service to the city. So
thank you so much. I appreciate it, and your presence was appreciated, and and it added value to the program. I thought a lot of people, so many amazing organizations that we have, a lot of nonprofits who are doing good work in our community.
Yeah, some of them I'd never even heard of, and what a tremendous resource. It was great. So congratulations.
Thank you very much, Diane. I appreciate it. Thank you to you. Thank you to Amherst, Councilmember Lee, for coming too. And thanks to everybody. It was this was another great meeting. You start out with the heroes, Diane. That was a fantastic idea. I loved it, and believe me, I spent a long time thinking long and hard. So I went and I initially told Ruby that she was going to be the Q2 hero at their appreciation lunch, which she cooked. And George was at the meeting, Masante. So I had him stand up to tell everybody, here's one of the heroes from last year. This is what we're talking about, the community heroes who do such good work in our community. So
yeah, we're really fortunate. Really fortunate.
We are.
Great job. Great job.
Thank you, Diane. I'm mindful of the hour. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Mr.
Sean,
Mayor?
you look like you have something to say.
Yeah, I did have a question because you had mentioned an interest in directing staff to develop information and educate the public through our website. That's something the council can do. They can't do it tonight because it's not on the agenda, but you can direct staff to bring it back. And so if that's an interest of the council, to direct staff to bring this back at our next meeting, staff can work on developing a program to inform the public about the consequences of the measure, if that's the council's direction.
I will ask the council, is that our desire to make sure that our website is educating the public on the consequences of the election?
See.
Yes. I see some yeses and some head nods. Do you have enough, Sean?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.